Hello and welcome to Six Part. Today I want to start a new series. What if Deku was not shy and innocent but a badass? If you enjoyed this video, please give it a big thumbs up and to watch more videos like this, subscribe to my channel and turn that bell notification on so you never miss an upload. Now wasting no more time, let's begin.
As Katsuki Bakugo and the other members of Class 1A sat in UA's auditorium, watching a pink-haired support course student fiddle with a big machine, he growled, "Why, the fuck, are we here? Ka-ka-chan." Izuku Midoriya exclaimed docilely while playing with Kota and Eri, keeping the kids occupied while the adults across the room exchange "that there are kids here" statements. Eijiro Kirishima put his hand on the ash blonde's shoulder and laughed. "Come on, Baku bro, it's not so bad. No one else is complaining." He ignored the teen's feral growl. The explosion quirk user rolled his eyes and sneered, "That's because the teachers already know why we're here. The girls are busy swooning over shitty Deku and the rest of you extras don't even have anything better to do." "Damn you, Midoriya." Minoru Mineta cried as he saw his female classmates, including Kyoka Jiru, who remained silent and observed from the corner of her eye, gush over how cute Midoriya was, crouching down to play with the kids and their toys. All of them had faint blushes on their cheeks. Denki Kaminari sighed and rubbed his neck while closing his eyes. "Come on, man. I mean, it is pretty cute." Mineta screamed, "Kaminari, how could you?" and turned to glare at the blonde, who was crying. Turning his own glare at the shorter boy, the electrification quirk user defended himself by saying, "What, I'm just calling it how I see it." Bakugo roared, "Will you idiots shut the hell up?" as tiny explosions lit up the space above his hands. Principal Nezu approached the group of students and said, Now, calm down, Bakugo. The reason you were brought here will be explained shortly." "Finished." Mei Hatsume cried as she hurried to the principal after leaving the machine, oil and grease smearing her face. As the girl arrived, the animal principal exclaimed, "Right now, in fact. Care to do the honors of explaining, Hatsume?" Tenya Iida, with his arm chopped robotically and his glasses readjusted, asked, "Principal Nezu, sir, were we really only brought here to see what this ruffian has been up to?" With a blank expression on his face and a slight tilt to his head, Shoto Todoroki asked in a monotone, "Ruffian? Is that the right word?" Honta Siro laughed and folded his arms across his chest, saying, "Dude, that's what you're worrying about." "Shut up, already," Katsuki yelled again, his head's veins clearly pulsing. Izuku got up and lifted Eri and Kota onto his shoulders, making the girls swoon over the cuteness once more. "What did you make, Hatsume?" he asked. Hatsume chuckled and pointed to her invention, two sizable cylindrical chambers connected by a network of computers, tubes, and wires. "This is my new, revolutionary creation, the travel tubes. Right now they only work by taking what's in the chamber on the left and moving it to the right, but if everything goes right, I should be able to cut the rooms out altogether, allowing heroes to teleport to the scene of a crime at will," she said. "That's amazing, Hatsume," Midoriya exclaimed as he placed the kids on the ground and smiled broadly at the pink-haired girl, drawing irritated glances from the female students. "Think about all the good that could come from this. You could." Bakugo yelled at the green-haired boy, "Shut it, you damn nerd. We don't have all day for you to go on a tangent." The boy responded with a sheepish smile. "What the hell does this have to do with us?" "Well," Mei said, a mad smile lighting up her face, "I'm finally ready for human trials after testing with inanimate objects and lab rats." As the class members stopped smiling, Mashirao Ojiro said uneasily, "I don't like where this is going," while scratching his cheek. Izuku took a step back and squeaked, drawing worried looks from most of the class. "Who human trials? Are you sure that's a good idea?" he asked. Unaware of her classmates' sudden fear, Mei joyfully responded, "Yuha. Principal Nezu didn't like me using animals, so after helping me with some of the calculations, we've decided it's ready for people." Ochako Uraraka stepped forward cautiously and said, But what happens if it explodes?" With a cheerful laugh, the pink-haired inventor exclaimed, "Don't know, it hasn't exploded yet." The green-eyed boy muttered, "The yet doesn't make me feel better," before sensing a tiny tug on his pants leg. Eri asked, her eyes wide as the young hero turned to face her, "Are you going to help her, Deku?" As the young girl gave him puppy dog eyes, Izuku stammered, "Well, I guess." "Bro, that's so manly," Kirishima said, flashing his sharp set of teeth. Ochako exclaimed, Deku, are you sure this is safe?" with the support of most of her classmates. With his hands in his hair, Kaminari yelled, Like, seriously dude, you know her track record. Yeah, but, Midoriya said, grinning affectionately as he reached down and tousled the kid's hair. A hero's job is to help people. Shota Aizawa, the erasure hero. Eraserhead, calmly stated, this is a bad idea. The weary instructor stood between the hero group the Wild Pussycats and Nomori Kayama, the 18+ only hero. Midnight. Present Mike, the hero Hisashi Yamada, yelled from the other side of the cat-themed heroes, calm down, Shota. Higari is down there helping her and Nezu already gave his permission. He turned away from his conversation with Snipe and Cementos and pointed to Powerloader, who was assisting the pink-haired girl in securing Izuku into her machine. Kayama teased, don't mind him, Dadvawa gets a little protective when his kids are in danger. This caused many people to laugh. Aizawa started to say, I am not, but stopped when Nezu pulled out his scarf. The principal jumped off the teacher's shoulder and started walking over to where Mirio Tagata and Toshinori Yagi, the former symbol of peace, All Might, were playing. The students completely ignored them as they gazed tiredly at the big machine. Now, let's settle down, they're almost finished down there so it's time for us to take our seats, he said. Looking from his scarf to his boss, Shota asked, how did you get in there? When did you get in there? Nezu grinned at his pupils and declared, all right, everyone, take your seats, it's time to begin. Made cheerfully said, let us know if you start feeling any pain, okay? As the door shut behind Izuku, preventing any response. The room watched in fascination as the machine almost instantly came to life, gases pumping through pipes and screens lighting up. As the chambers filled with blue light, the metal tubing started to glow orange, as if it were igniting with power. Then the machine started to tremble, and sparks flew as a pipe broke at the gas blast. Mina Ishido asked, is that supposed to happen? As she and her classmates appeared concerned once more. Hatsume laughed as she hurriedly started typing on computers, her eyes darting from one screen to another. Define supposed to happen. Powerloader yelled, Hatsume, as gas began to pump into the air and cracks appeared in the chambers before the room was filled with dazzling light. With a dense cloud of dust obscuring his view of his students, Aizawa coughed and asked, is everyone all right? As the dust settled and Uraraka started to look around, she muttered, yeah, but, where is Deku? As he stood up, Kaminari remarked, I think the better question is, where are we? The group was in a huge dome-shaped room with screens lining the walls that flickered between a fancy restaurant, a battlefield, static, and a battle. Juru stood up and grinned slightly, saying, that's a surprisingly good question for you. Hey! Denki yelled back, feeling irritated. Momo Yaoyorozu straightened her uniform and tried to change the topic by asking, Hatsume, do you know where we are? Mei exclaimed, nope, as she leapt to her feet, only to be instantly enthralled by the innumerable screens that surrounded them. From behind the group, a voice that sounded layered, male and female, young and old, as if several people were speaking in perfect unison, said, somewhere you shouldn't be. The group stared at the tall creature, which was almost twice as tall as their tallest members and composed of entirely smooth, glowing, white light that gave no distinguishing features. Who are you? Mineta squeaked as he skittered behind Mina, only to be swiftly kicked away. Lifting one of its massive, glowing arms to point to the room, the entity declared, I am a watcher. It is my job to observe the near countless realities and categorize the major events throughout time and space. This is a space between realms, which allows access to viewing all of reality. Nezu raised his paw to silence the others as they started to speak, asking in a serious yet upbeat tone, how did we get here? The Watcher's smooth, blank face said, you were playing with forces beyond your comprehension. When they played back, you were sent here. Its eyes, which were missing, were calmly fixed on the animal. The principal rubbed his maw and said, I see, while obliquely observing Mei's smile and slight head droop. In an attempt to understand the situation, Yaoyorozu said, you said you observe all reality here? How is that possible? I do not watch all of reality. I am merely assigned to observe the major events of different versions of specimen 0A06B78A9C2IM, or Izuku Midoriya, as you know him as. The light being said, I can accomplish this by the flow of time being dilated by 31,557,600,000 compared to the average realm, and the room allowing me to view points that have already happened, or have yet to happen. With a sheepish smile, Kirishima said, can you repeat that, bro? Accentually, By the time 1000 years pass in here, only 1 second will pass outside of here, and he uses this time to observe important points in time regarding to different versions of Midoriya. Nezu laughed as he explained. Correct. The observer attested. Despite her obviously perplexed tone, Midnight remarked, "You seem to be handling this well, sir. But, of course, we live in a world where many wonders powers exist. It always helps to keep an open mind," said the teacher. "Is our Deku okay?" Uraraka inquired, receiving nods of approval. Bakugo snarled, "Who the fuck cares?" and was slapped by Suyu Asui's tongue. "That has yet to be determined. Not enough time has passed from the point of your depart to now for anything to be made of his condition," the response being given. Ectoplasm summarized, "So, only the people outside of the machine were teleported." Present Mike shrugged and said, "I guess so." In an attempt to boost his students' spirits, Powerloader said, "Well, I guess your invention worked, Hatsume." Aizawa said, "Can you bring us back to our world?" in a voice that drowned out everyone else's murmuring. Before leaving the group, the entity remarked, "I will need to discuss this with the other watchers. Something like this has yet to happen." The teacher with black hair sighed, obviously already worn out, and asked, "How long will that take?" In response, Watcher said, "I do not know." Ashido, bouncing up and down with Toru Hagakuri's floating clothing, exclaimed, Oh, can we watch those other universe thingies you were talking about while you're gone?" The creature said, "Do as you wish, you can only observe from here, so interacting is impossible." Then, without making any noise or emitting any light, they simply vanished as if they had never existed in the first place. Hatsume, excited at the prospect of this one-of-a-kind experience, yelled into the air, "Wait, how do we watch them?" Before a screen appeared in front of the group, static already visible. "Oh, never mind," he said. With the flat piece of light floating entirely in the air and showing no indication of cables or controls, Mina asked, "How do we turn this thing on?" Bakugo glared as he turned his head away, keeping the screen visible out of the corner of his eye. "Why does it matter? It's just shitty Deku," he said. Kirishima put his arm around the ashy blonde and smiled, saying, "Oh, come on, Bakubro, it's not like there's anything else to do. Besides, how often do you get to see alternate versions of your friends? Maybe there'll even be a version you'll like." Katsuki growled, "As if I'd like anything about Deku," and then glared at the girl with pink hair, saying, "This is all your fault, pink hair." Mei ignored the erratic boy and asked, "Maybe it's voice controlled?" as Ashido hurried back to the group. "Hey, play universe thing," Toru exclaimed, her hands, which were invisible, encircling her mouth. With a sigh, Yaoyorozu said, "Hagakuri, I don't think that's how it works," but then the static vanished and was replaced by white text on a black screen. Realm display function activated. Universe DC 11515 CTEIM will be ready. Everyone's attention was captured when the words, "Visual loading," "Audio loading," appeared on the screen. The invisible girl laughed and patted the taller girl on the back, saying, "See, Yaomomo, sometimes yelling does solve your problems." The vice president of the class lowered her head in defeat upon seeing the message. Aizawa sighed and glanced at the laughing present Mike. "They've been spending too much time with you." Mina cried out, "It's starting," as the screen started to show pictures. Before there was thought, there was this place. One Earth, with one history, but with the coming of man, came the illusion of free will. With that illusion came chaos. With every choice we make, we literally make a world. History branches in two, creating one Earth, where we made the choice, and a second where we didn't. The man turned to face another man wearing an owl-themed uniform after hearing a deep, familiar voice say, "Welcome to Earth Prime." The owlman goes on, pressing the screen attached to a massive device, "That's the secret of the universe, you know. Billions of people, making billions of choices, creating infinite Earths. Every choice, every cell evolving in a unique way, making a new world." As Batman said, "Some so similar you could spend a lifetime searching for any distinction and some so radically different that defy comprehension." The screen zoomed in on his eyes before focusing on an odd gadget on the owlman's hip. As he started to circle his opponent, pointing to the desolate wasteland surrounding them and a yellow, shifting portal that was open nearby, Batman remarked, "And all the branches originate here." The man in the silver suit confirmed, typing again on the screen, "Every version of reality balances vicariously on this singular Earth." Yaoyorozu questioned, "So that's the original Earth? What happened to it?" Jiru wondered as he marveled at the screen. "But which one is Deku?" Uraraka questioned. perplexed as to why they were both hiding their faces. Todoroki assumed, attracting some strange glances. I think they both are. We're already dealing with multiple versions and their voices sound very similar. Iida asked, how did they even get there, since there were no signs of life anywhere? Zero pointed to the screen and said, probably through that weird gate thing. Kaminari smiled and said, they probably used that weird device. Aizawa declared, eliciting curious looks, how they got there isn't important. What is important is why they're there, and what that machines do. It seems so different from the Earth we know, Owlman replied calmly. I can't imagine what series of decisions lead to this Earth hurtling out of its orbit. The Silver Man finished typing and turned to face the dark-suited man. But, I know this, the source of the cataclysm was the same as it always is, he said. Glaring up at his opposite, anything, Batman countered, you can't be sure of that. Owlman interrupted, saying, man is a cancer and I've chosen to cut out the disease, you know better. The Dark Knight started, you're talking about killing, but was interrupted once more. The Silver Man pressed the screen again, bringing up the abort message, and said, everyone who ever lived, ever will live. Kaminari laughed sheepishly, drawing a few glares from appalled students. I guess we know who the bad guy is, he said. Killing everyone, why would anyone want to do that? Mina shivered in terror. Midnight sighed, observing the impact on her students already. Some people just want to watch the world burn. With tears in her eyes, Uraraka attempted to explain, but Deku would never. The girl's argument came to an end when Bakugo growled, that isn't Deku, round face. With red eyes glaring at the Silver Man, Shota said calmly, now we know why they're there. If that is the original Earth, then that machine must be some kind of bomb and when it goes off. Nezu lowered his head in a silent prayer and concluded, all Earths will most likely be destroyed, in a solemn tone. Owlman grinned as the machine turned on and the sound of electronics starting up filled the room as the lights came on. I decided to make the only viable, genuine decision. Batman squatted down in a fighting stance and said, you're insane. As he came down the stairs, the silver-dressed man said, does it really matter? There are alternate versions of me you'd find quite charming. A dense cloud of smoke enveloped the area as the darker clad of the two threw a set of black orbs at his opponent. Owlman grabbed Batman's fist and shoulder and threw him overhead as Batman rushed through the smoke, trying to punch the other man. Batman landed higher on the stairs, charged back down, and tried to attack again, but was blocked and sidestepped before being snatched by the throat and flung aside. After a quick flip to the ground, Batman attempted to launch 3 bat-shaped shuriken at Owlman, but the Silver Man swatted them away with a flick of his cloak. Owlman launched a vicious barrage of blows at his opponent, forcing Batman to retreat with each one. Owlman completed his combo by stepping onto the Dark Knight's chest and flip-kicking him into the air, which sent the bat-themed man flying into a huge stone pillar. Kaminari moaned, that's not good, as he observed the one-sided fighting. You think? Exclaimed Mineta as he realized that if the bomb went off, his life would be in danger. As he watched the fight, Katsuki yelled, come on, Deku, stop being a pussy, get up and kick his bird-themed ass. His heart was racing. Owlman calmly walked up to his opponent, who was having trouble getting back up, and said, from what I gather, we're very much alike. Everything about you tells the tale. Your attitude, your costume, and your tactics. They all scream of outrage, despair, vengeance. The silver-clad man asked, what terrible wrong was done to you to set you on this path? Before grabbing Batman by the throat, lifting him into the air, and slamming him into the pillar. It doesn't really matter, nothing matters, he said. Batman gasped for air and choked. What are you going to do? Talk me to death? He asked. The villain grinned and said, actually, before releasing his grip on his victim's throat and punching him across the face before severing his neck. I thought I'd beat you to death, he said. Owlman leapt into the air, intending to land where Batman was, and when the Dark Knight leapt aside, he leapt up the pillar, sending pieces of rock flying in all directions as his opponent crashed into the spot where he had fallen. The bat-themed hero quickly put his arm around Owlman's throat and raised a tiny spray can to his mouth after landing behind the bird-themed man. With a smile on his face, Owlman blocked the gas with a shield of glass before grabbing his opponent's hand, elbowing him in the stomach, tossing him over his shoulder, into the ground, and discarding him. Owlman aimed his wrist at Batman, who leapt back up and fired 4 gray discs that exploded on impact and caused the hero to flip away. The blast's force propelled the Dark Knight into the air, where he attempted to strike the silver-clad man with a grappling hook, but Owlman dropped his own smoke bomb, causing it to miss. Returning to the offensive, The villain emerged from the smoke and struck Batman hard in the stomach. He then punched the hero through a rock with additional forceful blows. Mina clenched her fist and watched an adult version of her friend get demolished. "I don't get it, why isn't Bat Doria using his quirk?" she exclaimed. Momo bit her lip in response to the bat-themed man's obvious superiority. "This is an alternate version. He may not have that quirk, and judging by how many gadgets he's been using, he may not have any powers at all." Zero asked, "Is no one going to comment on Bat Doria?" but was met with silence. Owlman picked Batman up again and yanked the same device from his hip and threw it aside, ignoring his opponent's almost desperate grab for it. "You should have sent your flying man. With his strength he might have had a chance, but you don't trust anyone else to do what needs to be done," he said harshly. "Huh, I feel the same way." In an effort to reason with his opponent, Batman begged, "If we're really alike, you know this is wrong. You must have been a good man once." Owlman raised his fist in response, saying, "No, not good, never good. After all, I'm only human." Owlman hit Batman hard twice before the Dark Knight covered his face with his hand and pulled it back to show a bat-shaped device affixed to the silver helmet. Batman was knocked away by the tiny machine's rapid beep before it exploded, and he immediately started to run for the bomb. Bakugo exclaimed, "Hell yeah, take that, you jackass," as sparks flew from his hands. "Bakugo, watch your language, there are still children present," Iida reprimanded him while he slashed the Bond's arm. Kirishima laughed and said, "Come on, bro, now really not the time." He was still anxious about the bomb but was as happy as his friends. As Batman started tapping the screen and scrolling through more Earths, Owlman appeared out of the smoke. The silver-suited man then put him in a headlock and growled, "No more debate, I am going to kill you now, then everyone else." "There is a difference between you and me," Batman moaned as he glanced up at the bomb while another light came on. "We both looked into the abyss, but when it looked back at us, you blinked," the hero said as he stepped off the device, flipped out of the hold, and overtook the villain before kicking him into the bomb and throwing a bola, tying him to the machine. Owlman was shocked to see that Batman had removed the handheld device from earlier. He then pressed a single button on it and looked down at his own hip. As purple lightning danced between the segments, the device's end broke in three, and the Dark Knight threw it back to the silver villain. The bomb churned with power as it and Owlman started to glow purple, but they vanished as soon as the man in silver broke free from his restraints and charged forward. "Hell yeah!" exclaimed the class, leaping in joy without Bakugo. Toru exclaimed, "He did it," while giving Mina a tight hug and squishing her cheeks together. As he leapt onto Eraserhead's shoulder, Nezu affirmed, "Indeed, without the bomb being on that Earth, I doubt it will have its intended effect." With a bored but impressed tone, Aizawa stated, his goal never was to defeat his opponent in combat, but to get that teleporter from him and move the bomb. Tsuyu lifted a finger to probe her mouth and said, "But he had his own, why didn't he use that?" Rikido Sato rubbed his own chin and remarked, "Perhaps his didn't work and that's why there's that yellow portal." As Owlman completed his lunge, the bomb reappeared on a desolate ice planet. As the villain looked around, the machine noisily powered up behind him. Then, the silver-clad man's attention was caught by the final light on the machine, "Abort," blinking on the screen. Owlman said, "It doesn't matter," as the bomb emitted a dazzling glow. Before the screen returned to static, the machine exploded in a monstrous explosion that swiftly devoured the ice planet. Everyone in the room was stunned and silent as they stared at the static screen. The celebration was interrupted by the last pictures that appeared on the monitor. With wide, perplexed eyes, Yaoyorozu gasped, "Why, didn't he?" As he thought about what had happened, Shota closed his eyes and said, "It's best not to wonder." For a while, nobody spoke, as everyone struggled to comprehend the notion of an Izuku who was so indifferent to life, including his own. Eijiro, Denki, and Mina all yelled, "Let's watch another," together, excited to see what else might be possible. As the vice president completed assembling a set of folding chairs, one for each person, Toru exclaimed, "Thanks, Yaomomo," and gave the raven-haired girl a hug. She sat down, a little exhausted, and the taller girls reassured her, "It's no problem." As he sat quietly in his own seat, Aizawa said, "Your control over your quirk has gotten better, good job." Mina laughed and leaned back in her chair, smiling broadly. "Ah, you made Dadvawa proud," she said. Shota snarled and used his quirk to glare at his pink-skinned pupil, saying, "Stop calling me that." Nezu grinned and stood in his chair, saying, Now, let's just move forward, no sense in wasting time arguing." Midnight covered her mouth and giggled, "Nezu's right, so let's just get this show going. May rocked in her seat and exclaimed, right, play universe. Prepare the universe MCU 15458 DSIMVSD. The realm display function is activated. As the group gazed at the screen, the static was replaced by visual loading, audio loading. Ectoplasm tilted his head slightly and said, I wonder what those letters and numbers mean. Snipe leaned back. Probably just some sort of organization method or something. Ironically, Hizashi bounced excitedly and silenced the two, saying, Shish, it's starting. Izuku looked around in wonder as planets appeared to float around above him and the sky danced with an enigmatic energy. Looking down at his wrist, the green-haired man gritted his teeth and emphasized his attire, which consisted of a crimson cloak, blue robes with 3 gray belts, and a golden amulet holding everything together. With a gentle wave of his hand over his wrist, the man observed a trail of green, mystical energy form around it. Bakugo raised an eyebrow and yelled, Where, in the fuck, is he? It looks like space on drugs, Shiro exclaimed, but his laughter abruptly stopped when Aizawa and Iida gave him a glare. Maybe it's some cool overdimension or something, exclaimed Uraraka, gazing at the celestial scene with sparkling eyes. With a cunning expression, Yaoyorozu murmured, But what is that light? His quirk? Maybe, or maybe not. Nezu laughed. This is an entirely different world, it could be a quirk, or it could be something completely different. Well, it does not sparkle like moi, exclaimed Yuga Aoyama, adopting an absurd stance. As the man turned around, the world behind Izuku burst into light. As the energy receded, Midoriya looked up at the light, his amulet glowing green, and saw that it was a single eye of a massive humanoid creature. With its head engulfed in magical flames, the monstrous creature loomed over the comet Izuku stood on and glared down at the man. Fumikage Tokiyami exclaimed, What mad banquet of darkness is this? As he saw the creature emerge. Mina translated, I think that's Tokiyami for, holy fuck. Nobody else said anything as they watched in horror and concern. With a shudder, Mineta screamed, and I thought Mount Lady was big, in shock. Eri leaned into Mirio, who put his protective hand around her and squeaked, Is Deku going to fight that? Dormammu, I've come to bargain. Izuku yelled as he leapt from one asteroid to another and approached the enormous creature, glancing at the green ring on his wrist. Dormammu leaned forward and roared, You've come to die. Your world is now my world. Like all worlds. With an ancient power. The green-eyed man had to dodge and block the flurry of large, purple spikes that rained down from above as Izuku swiftly formed 2 orange discs. Opening his mouth, Dormammu aimed a massive purple beam at the man. The force of the attack knocked Midoriya to his knees before he could even bring a disc to block it. Izuku screamed, Gah, as he fought the energy, which was like sparks flying past his shoulder. However, he was overpowered, and the purple power vaporized him as it smashed through everything in its path. Most of the class screamed in horror, Midoriya, while Bakugo and Todoroki gaped at the screen. Deku. Uraraka gasped as her eyes began to well up with tears, just like those of her classmates. Kaminari stammered in fear, what kind of power does that thing have? That's so not manly, Kirishima muttered, looking in horror. Mirio said, Some opponents just can't be reasoned with, while embracing an Eri who was crying at the moment. Before everything appeared to freeze in place, purple particles filled the air surrounding the attack's crevice. The attack then came back, followed by Izuku, and the world itself appeared to move backwards. Up until Izuku created the green ring by waving his hand over his wrist, the earlier events were replayed in reverse order. Everyone was staring at the screen in disbelief when Toru croaked, Wait, what? As everyone tried to understand what had happened, Mezzo Shoji, who is usually quiet, said, was that supposed to happen? Dormammu, I've come to bargain. Izuku yelled as he leapt from one asteroid to another and approached the enormous creature, glancing at the green ring on his wrist. Bakugo leapt from his seat and yelled, Who, the fuck, hit replay on this shit? What kind of sadistic bastard even installs a rewind feature like this? With new tears in her eyes, Yaoyorozu begged the screen, Midoriya, just run, we already know how this ends. Dormammu started to growl, interrupted himself with a puzzled expression, and then glared at the man with the green hair. What is this? Illusion? He asked. You've come to die. Your world is now mine. Without hesitation, Izuku answered, No, this is real. The enormous creature exclaimed, Good, before 2 spikes emerged from the shadows and stabbed Midoriya in the chest, swiftly taking his last breath. Mina exclaimed, "Oh, God," as her once pink face turned pale. Juru exhaled, "This is messed up," as she and other students appeared to be on the verge of throwing up. Shino Sosaki, the pro hero. Mandalay rubbed Kota's back while he buried his face in her side and asked, feeling sick, "Why? Why are we even watching this? Should we try turning it off?" asked Hizashi, his face scarred by a pained frown. Watching the screen with barely concealed anger, Aizawa snapped back, "No, something is happening." Nezu said gravely, his typically upbeat tone gone, "I agree. Not everything is how they appear." Before Izuku leapt from one asteroid to another, the screen swung around until his body was no longer visible. "Dormammu, I've come to bargain," the green-haired man yelled as he walked up to the enormous creature, taking a quick look at the green ring around his wrist. Bakugo exclaimed, "Okay, what the fuck is happening?" as they watched the scene start over. "Deku, please just leave," Uraraka pleaded, unable to bear to watch her friend perish. Dormammu snarled, then looked around bewildered, asking, What is happening?" Toru exclaimed, "That's what we want to know," and everyone in attendance nodded in agreement. Izuku responded, gesturing to the surroundings before pointing to the green ring that was dangling around his wrist. "This is time. Endless, looped, time. Just as you gave Caecilius powers from your dimension, I've brought a little power from mine." "You dare!" Dormammu yelled, lifting his arm above his head and striking the human with it. Izuku started to sigh, before being crushed. Struggling to comprehend what was happening, Uraraka choked out, "So they're in a different dimension. And that ring is time from Earth." Nezu nodded. Midoriya was able to, somehow, create a loop where every time he dies it restarts him at a set point. "Like a save point?" Zero inquired, perplexed. "Like from a video game?" The principal nodded, his smile returning with a hint of grimness, accentually. With her watery, onyx eyes widening in realization, Yaoyorozu started, "But, wait, if that were the case, then..." Nezu went on somberly, "He remembers and feels every time he dies, he'd remember every time this happened." Izuku called out, "Dormammu, I've come to bargain," while examining the ring on his wrist. "You cannot do this forever," Dormammu glared at the human and declared. Midoriya retorted, pointing around, "This is how things are now, you and me. Trapped in this moment endlessly. Actually I can." After witnessing his friend's double murder, Todoroki finally said, "Why would he do this?" Ojiro sighed, his voice shaking as the adults bowed their heads. "He had to have known this would happen," he said. As he rubbed the wound that had ended his career, Toshinori muttered, "Sometimes heroes have to make sacrifices." Dormammu snarled and lowered his face to the mortal, saying, "Then you will spend an eternity dying." "Yes," Izuku replied, lowering his head before turning to face the giant. "But everyone on Earth will live," he said. Uraraka exclaimed, "Deku, there has to be another way," in an attempt to assist this incarnation of her friend. Baring his sharp teeth at the screen, Kirishima roared, "Yeah, man, you've never given up before, why start now?" "But you will suffer," Dormammu said, stepping back a little too much. With tears in his eyes, Izuku gazed off into the distance before turning back to face the monster and croaking, "Pain's an old friend." Mina's heart broke at the sound and admission, so she whispered, "Why did he sound so sad?" Sighing, Yaoyorozu vowed in silence to spare their Izuku from such suffering. "We don't know what these versions have been through. They said something about that in the last world. What terrible wrong was done to you to set you on this path?" Iida said with a scowl. "We were all too concerned about the bomb to even realize what that meant." Without hesitation, Dormammu unleashed another beam that instantly destroyed Izuku. Midoriya yelled, "Dormammu!" before the screen depicted him being impaled once more. Izuku continued, "I've come to bargain," as he moved forward once more. Toru exclaimed, "Stop, please, just stop," as she and her classmates turned away from the screen. With tears streaming down her cheeks and onto the former student's shirt, Eri said, "Mirio, can't you help him?" Tagata stammered out, "Eri," before sighing, "I'm sorry." Dormammu snarled, "End this," and threw another asteroid at the man as he advanced. "Dormammu!" Izuku exclaimed as he advanced once more. "Dormammu! Once more! Dormammu! Once more!" The ground beneath Midoriya's feet changed into spikes on the screen, and they pierced through him. Then Izuku was torn apart by the screen's flashing green tentacles that emerged from nearby fissures. The man's neck was then swiftly wrapped in red chains on the screen, which caused it to snap. At last, the screen displayed Izuku using the same orange discs to block tiny purple beams before one of them broke through and vaporized him. Midoriya collapsed in his reset position, gasping. How many times did this happen? Jiru's face went completely white, and she closed her mouth with her hands clasped over it. Present Mike looked at the man gravely and whispered, "Shota, don't you think this is going a bit too far?" The black-haired teacher remained silent, gazing at the enormous creature with unbridled anger. He was aware that they might observe something far worse, but there was nothing they could do about it. Dormammu watched Izuku gasp and struggled to stand up, saying, "You will never win." Midoriya gasped as he forced himself to stand up, his voice growing stronger with each step. "No, but I can lose, again, and again, and again, and again forever, and that makes you my prisoner." Katsuki roared, sparks flying from his palms. "What the hell is the point of a prisoner if you're the one getting tortured, dumbass?" Nezu calmly responded, drawing a barrage of perplexed glances. "He's already said why. He said he's come to bargain." "No," Dormammu snarled, sending a stream of spikes through Izuku. As Midoriya leapt back onto the asteroid floating in front of him, the massive creature demanded, "Stop, make this stop, set me free." The human calmly approached the Colossus and said, "No, I've come to bargain." Aizawa leaned back in his chair and covered his mouth with a scarf, saying, "You were right." With a deep frown on his face from witnessing his classmates' suffering, Sato scratched the side of his head and asked, "But what is he bargaining for?" Dormammu threw his head dangerously close to the human and growled, "What do you want?" Izuku made a sign with his hands and said, "Take your zealots from the earth, end your assault on my world and never come back. Do it and I'll break the loop." Izuku's willingness to sacrifice himself even across worlds left Mineta speechless. He did it, even after dying so many times. He never gave up. He won, Mineta exclaimed. "Huh, hell of a kid you got there," Tiger exclaimed, unable to conceal his admiration. Aizawa complained, concealing his smile behind his scarf. "His recklessness seems to expand space and time. Fantastic." Eri dried her tears on Mirio's sleeve and muttered, "Deku's the best," with a tiny smile. The entire world froze. The screen displayed people frozen in the middle of stepping toward food that was suspended in midair. The first indication of movement was when a man dressed in dark combat robes forced himself to stand, turning to face another man who was having difficulty standing up and yelling, "Get up, Midoriya. Get up and fight. We will finish this." He leapt to his feet and faced a man, flanked by two dark-robed subordinates with black markings around their eyes and the man in yellow robes, while the other man stared at him bewildered. Izuku was not in the picture. With her eyes still a little wet, Mina tilted her head and said, "Why is he telling Midori to get up when he's not even there?" As his tentacle changed into a mouth, Shoji uttered the words, "They were messing with time." The dark-eyed man exclaimed, "Isn't it beautiful, a world beyond time, beyond death," as he advanced, but Izuku appeared behind him, causing the man to turn and ask, "What have you done?" As the screen stayed on the man, Izuku said gravely, "I made a bargain." He then glanced down at his hand. The yellow-robed man demanded, "What is this?" as the display showed his hand turning to ash. Izuku laughed and shook his head, saying, "Well, it's everything you ever wanted. Eternal life as part of the one. You're not going to like it." Kaminari scowled at the screen and scratched the side of his head, muttering, "Part of the one, what does that mean?" "Well, Midoriya did say that Dormammu had to remove his zealots." Nezu breathed a sigh of relief. "I believe we've just discovered who those zealots are." "Gah!" screamed Caecilius and his henchmen as their bodies quickly turned to dust and shot into the sky, entering the cosmic realm where Izuku perished numerous times. As he watched the villains vanish, Izuku sighed, "You know, he really should have stolen the whole book, because the warnings come after the spells." "Spells? So those powers were magic?" Momo exclaimed as she realized the true nature of this version's abilities. Kirishima exclaimed, "Dude, he's a wizard. That's so manly." Ojiro dropped his head in realization and asked, "Are we just going to ignore Izuku just sent those guys to the place where he died a bunch?" As many in the class started to lose hope at the news, Aizawa reassured them, they were zealots of that being, meaning they were probably responsible for it coming there and the reason he had to sacrifice himself. They brought this upon themselves. As Midoriya shot him a questioning glance, the heavier-set man started to laugh, but it soon turned into full-blown laughter before he sighed, "Oh, that's funny." After shrugging that off, Izuku lifted his arm to the sky, causing a green magic circle to materialize in front of his hand. The area around them started to flow backwards as he laboriously twisted his arm to the side. The crack in the sky narrowed and then vanished, and rubble flew back into position. People started to move as the screen went to static, giving the impression that time had started over. Sato leaned into his seat and smiled as he watched the static, pleased that his classmates' gamble had paid off. "So, that's it, then?" he asked. Suyu scowled at the screen, concerned that her friend was constantly being forced to sacrifice himself. "Guess so," she said. Shaking his head and closing his eyes, Tokiyami sighed, "What a mad banquet of darkness." Kirishima smiled, excited to see more. "So," she asked, "who's ready for the next one?" "The hell is wrong with all of you?" Bakugo yelled, agitated by the dank, stale air. Uraraka glared at the blonde boy and growled, "You may not care about Deku, but some of us do." The rest of her classmates gradually woke up from their stupor after witnessing their friend's death several times. With a firm, "Enough, both of you," Aizawa interrupted Bakugo's response by using his quirk to glare at his students. Iida sighed and put a reassuring hand on the brown-haired girl's shoulder, saying, "Let's start the next one." With his trademark smile, Hizashi exclaimed, "Good idea," before turning to the screen and saying, "Play universe." Realm display function engaged. D2FLSG1332IMVSS universe preparation. Audio loading, visual loading, etc. As he lost the opportunity, Kaminari sighed, "Ah, I wanted to do that." As the screen started to display images, Aizawa sighed and rubbed the bridge of his nose, saying, "You can get the next one." Izuku laughed as he passed through a circular doorway and headed for a railing, saying, "Looks like we're all done and dusted here, kiddos." The green-haired man was older than the original, but he looked younger than his two predecessors. This Midoriya wore a brownish-gray cape that was tattered and damaged, with padded blue armor underneath. The cape's hood was pushed up by a metal horn attached to a helmet that concealed most of his green hair. As he leaned over the railing and watched lights turn on to illuminate hundreds of levels of cells below, Izuku rubbed his hands together. "Ramen's on me." As she and her classmates chuckled at the horn on Midoriya's head, Toru asked, "Why is he wearing that?" As she tried to remain calm, Yaoyorozu said, "Perhaps it is some sort of war symbol? Like how ancient tribes wore feathered crowns." Yawara Chitora, the hero tiger, remarked sternly, "I take it this one is a lot more lighthearted?" With his eyes fixed on the screen, Aizawa sighed and said, "Forget what he's wearing and focus on where he is." Mina laughed, imagining their Izuku with plastic horns. "Ah, but I have a new horn buddy," she said. Mirio rubbed his chin and grinned a little as Eri laughed with the class. "It looks like some kind of prison, but what's with the destruction and embers?" he thought out loud. As Uraraka stopped laughing and took note of the details her upperclassmen had brought to her attention, she asked, "Was it attacked?" As her floor glowed, dozens of floors below Izuku, a woman with blue skin, red hair, and an eye patch remarked, "Looking pretty good down here, just gotta check one last thing." The woman with the red hair hurried to a door that was locked and proceeded to a three-pronged device on the door's side. She pulled out her pistol and stood in front of the triangular device, turning it 90 degrees to the right as red light glowed behind the prongs and the door started to open, spewing out mist. As she moved forward, the woman's one blue eye seemed to shine through the mist. She swiftly pulled out a flashlight and approached open containment pods, inspecting each one. "Izuku. He's gone. This isn't a prison riot, it's a prison break." The woman growled in a terrified tone as she arrived at the last and largest pod and discovered it was empty. When Aizawa said, "So it is a prison," his eyes narrowed. Nezu looked upbeat before his tone changed to one of sobriety and seriousness. "Yes, but more importantly, that appears to be some form of high containment unit, and if they really escaped," Nezu said, "then something really bad is loose." Midnight sighed and closed her eyes in frustration. As he leapt away from the edge in shock, Izuku heard the woman's voice over their communicators. "The airlock on deck 0. It's the only way out this far down." He turned slowly to face the tangle of wires and flames supporting the platform he was standing on. "They're going to escape," Izuku said. As he ascended the chamber and approached the cables, Midoriya thought to himself, "Not if I get there first." The caped man pulled out a black and white revolver with the spade symbol painted on it and closed one eye while aiming it at the burning wires. With her eyes widening in realization, Momo said, "Wait, he's not going to." As she put the pieces together, Pixie Bob exclaimed, "You're kidding, right? You couldn't even see the bottom when it was lit up." Knowing what was about to happen, Aizawa sighed, Are all of them this reckless? The sound of distant gunfire greeted the blue-skinned woman as she dashed into the central chamber. Izuku? She asked. As the platform Izuku had been standing on lost support and started to plummet into the abyss below, the woman ran to the edge and looked up. The one-eyed woman saw Izuku riding to debris down with a single wire in his hand and waving his revolver at her as he went by, as if in slow motion. With a fiery explosion that lit up the darkness, the flaming husk fell swiftly into the depths. The woman shouted, "Izuku," as she pushed off the railing and fled. Shiro yelled, "Holy shit," but Tsuyu slapped him in the head and nodded at the kids. A big drop of sweat appeared on Tiger's forehead, and he asked in surprise, "Is he actually insane?" Toru nervously laughed, thinking of the green-haired boy in a cocoon for his own safety. I think we need to wrap our Midoriya in bubble wrap or something." Kirishima exclaimed, "That is manly as hell," as stars began to appear in his eyes. A strange, pale blue energy radiated from a strange red and white device that spun over a piece of concrete. As the blue energy sank through the debris below, the device shrank into a drone-like shape with a final pulse. Izuku grunted and pushed the concrete slab away from him as the blue energy entered his body, healing the green-haired man's last wounds. "Never felt better, Izuku moaned, rolling his neck and rubbing his head. He didn't bother to gaze at the charred remnants of the landscape, instead letting the drone hover over his hand before the machine transformed into the enigmatic energy and sank into him. Kaminari cried out in bewilderment, "Where did that thing come from?" "It seems capable of healing him," Cementos remarked solemnly while massaging his chin. "It would explain why he was so quick to do something so reckless if he had that thing at his disposal," Midnight said, squinting her eyes at the screen. "That device might be able to heal his injuries, even from a fall like that, but that doesn't mean he should be so reliant on it," Aizawa protested, secretly lamenting that his pupil was being given more justification to endanger his own life. Mei, bouncing in her seat and watching the screen with heat in her eyes, exclaimed, "Amazing. It's some sort of portable medical robot that is capable of transforming itself into pure energy and storing itself within the user. Oh, don't worry, baby. Mama is gonna start working on you as soon as she gets out of here," she said. Power Loader sighed and said, I don't think so. After this, you are going to be banned from the workshop for a long, long time," but his words were ignored. "You see that, Petra?" Izuku exclaimed as he stood up and picked up his revolver. "Petra, Guardian, must have knocked out the comm relays with that spectacular landing," Izuku repeated after receiving no response. Curious, Toru asked, "Who's Petra?" Kaminari shrugged and said, "Probably that blue-skinned chick." Aizawa sighed, already anticipating the worst. "And thanks to his stunt, his communications are out." "That can't be good," Shiro swallowed, his anxiety rising again. Izuku looked up and saw a big, yellow-clad humanoid with odd purple eyes strapped to its chest. The man with green hair turned to look to the right and saw another creature, but this one had purple flames coming from its head. Before the screen swung back to show 5 massive humanoids standing on the ledge above him, the hooded man saw another and another. And, cue the ominous music. Izuku sighed as he turned to face the group. Kaminari exclaimed, "That's really not good," before Jiru's earphone jack poked her in the ear. "No shit, Sherlock." Kyoka swore, staring at the blonde boy as the other anxious viewers failed to notice the display. As the creatures prepared their weapons, Izuku laughed and raised his hands, saying, "Okay, everybody, back in your cages." The monster with the large metal symbol on its helmet responded by raising its staff and then slamming it back down, causing a deep blue energy to glow in the crystal on the end. As a swarm of smaller, yellow humanoids emerged from the shadows, Midoriya growled and spun his revolver, saying, "I said, back in your cages." Aizawa rubbed the bridge of his nose and grunted. Now, he is surrounded by the enemy, outnumbered, and without a way to call for backup. This is why you shouldn't do things recklessly. "I don't like where this is going," Todoroki sighed monotonically. Izuku casually shot the first creature over his shoulder without looking back as they closed in, attacking from all sides. The bullet struck the monster's head, causing an explosion of pale blue energy. As he started forward, the hooded man whirled rapidly on his feet and threw a knife into another creature, instantly killing it. A fourth, larger humanoid charged him from behind after Midoriya finished his spin and shot another creature in the head. Izuku lined up his pistol with the creature's throat, pulled the trigger, and the creature fell backwards, dead, while he deftly blocked the attack and allowed the creature to push him backwards. Snipe laughed and marveled at the green-haired man's accuracy, saying, "Oh, this one's got style." Mina exclaimed, "He's just killing them," while most of her classmates gazed at the screen in astonishment and horror. "It's either them or him," Aizawa grunted, observing every action on screen with a calculating, icy gaze. Ochako attempted to argue, seemingly seeking an excuse to skip the scene, saying, "Yeah, but there has to be another way, right? I mean, Deku would never." "Miss Uraraka, Midoriya does not have the luxury to hold back," Nezu said with a stern voice. "He isn't battling some random villain. These things were locked away for a reason and obviously have no arguments with killing him. Sometimes, one must put their own survival as their top priority." The students simply kept their eyes on the screen without responding. Izuku killed the next opponent before the freshly shot one hit the ground by swiftly shooting another approaching creature and then quickly throwing a knife into it. Midoriya opened his revolver's chamber, spun the gun, letting the empty shells fall out, then loaded a fresh round of bullets and shut the gun. As he stood up, the green-haired man dodged one of the humanoid's swings, causing it to stagger forward. Before the green-haired man fired on a red canister behind yet another creature, Izuku swiftly shot the stumbling monster with his left hand on the revolver's hammer. He then turned and shot two more creatures, killing them. When the canister exploded into a ball of fire, the creature was knocked off its feet and flew in the direction of Izuku, who dodged it with a bow. The body then collided with two more creatures that were coming up behind the man. With a menacing smile, Bakugo exclaimed, "Hell yeah, explosions for the win." "Holy shit, that was manly," Kirishima smiled. "They aren't humans." Shoto's normally monotone voice suddenly contained a tiny sigh of relief. Yaoyorozu raised an eyebrow at the two-tone boy and said, "What are you talking about, Todoroki?" The son of Endeavor explained, "Those things Midoriya is fighting, they aren't humans." Toru asked, presumably glancing at the teenager, "How can you be so sure?" Nezu affirmed and clarified, "He's right. Those creatures' physiology is too close to one another, yet too different from Midoriya's for them to be the same species. Midoriya is clearly human, which means they are not." The students nodded, feeling somewhat relieved by the explanation. Izuku calmly leapt over two more monsters that rushed his flank after bowing slightly to the creatures as they fell. The green hair man was pushed farther into the air and onto a sizable piece of debris by a flash of light as more of the monstrosities swarmed to where he had been standing. Midoriya swayed to regain his balance as he landed on the shaking rubble. Three more creatures were already approaching the hooded man when he turned to look to his left. Izuku produced a slender cylindrical apparatus, which he attached to the side of a piece of debris by pressing a button. The handheld device immediately released a thin, red beam of light. As they ascended the side of the jagged metal, Midoriya shot two more of the creatures as he was moving away from the device. Then, as the first three creatures crossed the red light, he leapt to another pile, causing the machine to explode into a huge explosion that engulfed the upper part of the platform. With a tone of relief, Midnight said, "Well, he seems to be able to handle himself pretty well." Aizawa said solemnly, closing his eyes for a moment, "And luck runs out, he's getting lucky." After being forced to slide down the debris by the blast, Izuku shot one of the creatures as it flew over his head. Another of the four-armed humanoids swiftly grabbed the green-haired man from behind as soon as he hit the ground again. The man yelled in surprise as the monster flung Midoriya toward a big chunk of metal. The metal shook as he struck it, and the hooded dropped his weapon, falling with it. Izuku moaned as he repositioned the metal horn beneath his hood. "Yup, that hurt." As he observed the creature casually tossing a fully grown adult, Nezu remarked, "Looks like those things are stronger than most humans. I guess it's fortunate that was the first serious blow he's received then." Pixie Bob laughed uneasily, attempting to calm everyone down. Tomoko Shiratoko, a former hero, Ragdoll sighed, her happy voice still unable to return after her experience at the training camp. "It doesn't matter if it's the first or not, he won't be able to take many more of those." As the green-haired man picked up his revolver and started to stand up, the creature that had thrown Izuku tore a jagged piece of metal from the flaming heap. As the creature swung upward and struck the man in the chest, sending him flying with another scream of shock and agony, Midoriya turned to face it. Izuku collided with an overturned bridge, rolling down its sections before stabbed into the metal with a knife to halt his fall just as he reached the last section that was only hanging on by a single coupling. When he hit the ground, the hooded man looked down and saw four more creatures poised to attack. Midoriya made a snap decision, shot the coupling, and leapt off the bridge, diverting the creatures as the big piece of metal landed on them. As he gazed at the screen with weary eyes, Aizawa complained, "Quick decision-making, a useful trait to have." Izuku jumped back up and yelled, Sorry, before turning around and shrugging, not sorry, he then turned to face the fallen creatures. Present Mike laughed at the small joke. He can keep his calm too. That's pretty useful too, right, Shota? The tried man sighed. Joke-making on a battlefield is irrational and distracting. As Izuku approached the group of creatures, he shot one of them in the head. As another creature leapt at him, he slid beneath it and shot it in the head as well. So, manly, Kirishima nearly broke down in tears, wiping his happy eyes with his forearm. Snipe leaned forward a little and said, "He's well trained. Every move he's making is done with precision and accuracy." Yes, Nezu nodded and laughed, but even the best training has its limits against overwhelming numbers. Before he could shoot another monster, Izuku pushed himself back up and slashed his knife across one of the approaching ones. As the screen receded and revealed the larger humanoids still standing over the green-haired man, observing, Midoriya engaged in combat with a third. One of the creatures moved away from the group and prepared its weapon. Mina was perplexed and concerned that Izuku hadn't even started on the most significant threats, so she asked, "Why haven't they joined in yet?" When Momo realized the plan for this alternate version, she whispered in horror, "They're letting him tire himself out first." Before another creature attacked him from behind, Izuku punched one of them away. The green-haired man was hit so hard that he flew into a piece of metal, which flipped with him and struck another creature. Midoriya landed in a crouch and shot another humanoid while using his other arm to grab the metal plank. Izuku emerged from beneath that metal and shot another creature in the head after it ran into the plank and overturned it. The green-eyed man was already being charged by a sizable horde as the blue energy from the shot swiftly faded. "Is there no end to these things?" Kaminari pleaded, frantically running a hand through his hair. Jiru chuckled and aimed her earjack at the blonde boy, saying, "At least he's handling himself better than you did at USJ." As he lowered his head in defeat and embarrassment, the electric user sighed, "Now, why'd you have to bring that up?" Izuku turned to run after giving the approaching group a quick shake of his head. As Midoriya dashed past, swerving through more of the creatures, the larger humanoid that had left the group started to climb a wall. As he ran past, the hooded man shot one of the monsters, more easily replacing it. When he came to a small pile of rubble, the green-haired man fired another. With his revolver starting to glow orange with a bright light of power, Izuku leapt from the pile. Izuku turned around in midair and aimed his burning, golden weapon as the orange light quickly covered him and illuminated the swarm behind him. With excitement and anticipation, Toru jumped in her seat and exclaimed, "That must be this Midoriya's power." Zero exclaimed, "That looks so cool," as he observed the golden energy dancing like flames around the man. Aoyama put a hand under his chin and responded, "Oui, but it does not sparkle like moi." Yaoyorozu put a gentle hand across her chest and said, "But what does it do?" As he observed the peculiar energy, Snipe concluded, "It seems to be some kind of energy that he can channel through his gun." Bakugo rolled his eyes and rested his chin on the palms of his hands, growling, "If you'd all shut the hell up, we're about to find out." Izuku cried out, "No," as he was tackled through the air by another creature, the orange energy fading as they flew before they landed. Iida gasped in horror, but Katsuki said, "Oh, for fuck's sake," with a roar of frustration. Midnight winced at the blow the man received and nearly hissed, "Seems like those things aren't as mindless as the look." "Things are going downhill fast." Hizashi bit his fingernails and spoke in a shaky voice. In a desperate attempt to find some hope in this situation, Yaoyorozu looked at her homeroom teacher and asked hopefully, "But he has backup coming, right? At least that red-haired girl?" As he closed his eyes, Aizawa lamented, "Who knows how long it would take her to arrive." The big animal that had broken away from the others fell from a post that hung overhanging, its legs encircling the metal so that it hung upside down. As another of the average-sized creatures approached the still-downed Izuku, the creature prepared its rifle once more. Midoriya started to get up and aim his gun at the first creature, but it swung upward and knocked the weapon out of his hand. The green-haired man was forced to flee as the revolver slid across the floor and the creature crashed down where he had been, smashing the ground. "What's he gonna do now?" Mineta questioned, observing a person he held in the highest regard as they battled for their lives. Iida tried to maintain a serious, flat tone while expressing his friend's fear and anxiety, saying, "He needs to get his weapon back, without it." Izuku fell to the ground and saw his revolver a few feet away through a thin layer of dust. One of the creatures grabbed the hooded man by his cape and yanked him away as he quickly leapt for the weapon. The big creature's eyes were displayed on the screen as it observed Izuku being flung into the arms of another creature while peering through its scope. Midoriya's head bounced off the hard surface as the creature used all of its strength to push him headfirst into a wall of jagged metal, tearing flesh and blood from his face. Oh, God! Yaoyorozu gasped in horror, her hands covering her mouth as tears welled up in her eyes. Mina's eyes began to well up with tears, and her pink skin turned pale. This is horrible, she choked out. Don't you dare lose to these extras, Bakugo snarled, glaring at the screen with sparks flying from his palms. Damn it, Deku. As the monstrosities surrounded him, Izuku fell to the ground and rolled onto his back. With animalistic growls after each blow, the creature started to kick and stomp on the fallen man, sending grunts of pain through the air. He doesn't even have a way to defend himself, Kirishima said, his fingers digging painfully into his leg as he swore through gritting teeth. With embers dancing in the air around his left side and his heterochromatic eyes glaring at the creatures, Todoroki said in a monotone, I don't think they care about that. Izuku suddenly leapt into the air, glowing orange. The man with green hair extended his arms, revealing a multitude of golden knives that shot into the animals. As Izuku landed on his feet, blood trickling onto the metal floor, the horde of monsters fell to the ground and gradually turned into burning ash. Izuku strode over and grabbed his revolver, growling, That's it, now, I'm pissed. Kaminari exclaimed, Fuck yeah, as the adults in the area began to shield the kid's eyes and ears. With relief coursing through her body, Momo placed a gentle hand on her chest and asked, So, that orange light is some kind of fire ability? Toru asked, turning to face the two-colored boy, kinda like Todoroki's. His is stronger, Shoto replied, gaining a few perplexed glances. He was able to completely disintegrate all of them with one hit each and caused far less damage to his surroundings. I may be able to produce more fire, but mine isn't that hot, and I don't have as much control. As his class lost themselves in their feelings, Aizawa sighed and shook his head, saying, Don't celebrate too early, he has yet to begin on the larger threats. With a gentle slap on his arm, Midnight calmed the weary man and asked, Can't you let them be happy that their friend is still alive? Gah! Izuku exclaimed as one last creature pinned him to a wall after tackling him from the side. Mineta curled up in his seat and screamed, How many more of those things are there? His classmates soon fell silent. Toru watched the man on the screen struggle and muttered in shock, They just keep coming. As he struggled to move, blood trickled from the green-haired man's face onto the monster's yellow helmet. The creature roared as it pushed it back once more as Midoriya slowly started to turn his revolver. He threw his head forwards, the metal spike he wore piercing through the helmet and making it fall limp. Izuku turned his head to his left, saw that his arm was still free, and quickly grabbed the creature's shoulder before drawing it closer. While he and the others watched Izuku kill the final creature, Kaminari muttered, Suddenly that horn doesn't seem so funny, and received a few nods of agreement. Take this as a lesson. Aizawa moaned, rousing his students from their daze. Even if something doesn't look dangerous, anything can be if used correctly. Mina rubbed the horns on her head and thought to herself, I wonder if mine can do that. Izuku slid his horn out of the creature's skull and leaned back against the wall. Midoriya grunted and started to hobble through the ash and death-strewn battlefield in the direction of where the bigger animals were still observing him from above. Izuku yelled between his pants, Is that really all you've got? His body was hurt, and he was having trouble moving. His jaw appeared to be broken, and his words were a little warped. As he closely examined the screen, Snipe remarked, Looks like that was the last of the small fries. With his arms folded across his chest, Cementos interrupted, But now he has a much larger problem to deal with. Present Mike looked from the screen to his fellow teacher and asked, Was that meant to be a pun? As she worriedly watched the screen, Mandalay interrupted, Is taunting them really a good idea? Aizawa rubbed the bridge of his nose and replied, I don't think anything he does is a good idea. As Izuku came to a halt, the screen displayed the rifle charging with purple energy while the sniper scope was trained on his swaying body. With a mumble, Help me out here little buddy, Midoriya raised his left hand and let go of the blue energy that had transformed into the early little drone. I totally forgot about that thing, cried Zero, bouncing up and down with a big smile. Kirishima grinned and said, So manly, huh? Doesn't matter how much damage they do to him, that little machine can just fix it all. As Momo rubbed her chin gently, she asked herself, But why has that creature taken a shot yet? It's had Midoriya in its sights for a while now. Her eyes widened in horror and realization, and then she said, Unless. The scope hurried onto the drone as soon as it appeared and fired the purple energy without delay. The machine was shattered by the blast's clean penetration of its target, which also caused a blue energy pulse to explode throughout the surrounding area, illuminating everything with dazzling light. Aizawa closed his eyes and muttered, "That's why you shouldn't rely so heavily on something like that." Kaminari's smile vanished from his face as he watched the screen in disbelief and croaked, "What just happened?" "That's what they were waiting for," Yaoyorozu uttered as her heart began to pound once more. Mina turned to the taller girl and asked, "What do you mean?" "They must have known Midoriya possessed that device, so they sent those creatures after him, not to kill him, but to draw it out so they could destroy it," Nezu said sadly, drawing the students' attention. "They were planning that from the very beginning," Todoroki said in his typical monotone. "They knew all along." "It would seem so," Nezu affirmed, his normally upbeat smile now reduced to a somber husk. Mei muttered, "That poor baby," but everyone in the room ignored her as reality set in. With his hood blown down and blood still streaming from his face, Izuku forced himself off the ground as the light went out and the last of the shards fell. The green-haired man looked up to see the bigger animals all leaping down into the pit alongside him. As he watched them slowly approach, Izuku's expression hardened. One of them was dragging a big, spiked metal ball that was attached to a chain and moving forward while producing sparks. As it moved ahead of the others, the enormous creature raised the ball and caused it to catch fire. Izuku swallowed the lump forming in his throat and turned the revolver he was holding to reveal the spade symbol painted on the side. "I'm coming home," he said. Toru presumably tilted her head and asked, "Who's Ace?" "Ace was his son," Snipe replied in a detached, emotionless tone. Aizawa raised an eyebrow at the hero with a Western theme and asked, "How do you know?" Removing his hat and placing it in front of his chest in a silent prayer, Snipe answered, "I may not be as smart as you or Nezu, but I've been in enough battles to know that tone, to know what it means." Izuku pulled his hood up again and pushed himself to stand up straight. As the tall creature started to approach him more quickly and moved its arms back in preparation for an attack, the green-haired man raised his gun again, his arm trembling as it struggled with its own weight. With the roar of flames reverberating through the air, Midoriya continued to stare at the creature as it swung the burning ball forward. The screen went black as the rattling of chains overcame the flames, casting an unsettling orange glow over half of the hooded man's face. Mina stared in horror and shock, asking, why didn't he try to dodge?" In response, Midnight bit the inside of her cheek and said, "He could hardly walk, he couldn't have dodged if he wanted to." The room was silent. Nobody knew what they could or should say. The other side of a wall was revealed as a silhouette that crashed through the darkness with a thunderous boom. The large creature stood in the middle of the hole, its ball and chain slowly coming to a stop at its side. Before it came to a halt and the screen turned to static, the Izuku's black and white revolver bounced onto the concrete floor and clanked across it. Uraraka's voice cracked as she fought against a scream in her throat, choking back a sob of realization. "He's not," she said. Unconsciously rubbing the scar across his right eye, Nezu said, "We are watching major events. Not all of them will be victories," while lowering his head and closing his eyes. Hizashi broke the deafening silence by whispering to Aizawa, "Shouldn't we say something?" "No," the weary man grunted, opening his eyes to observe his pupils as they silently processed what they had just seen. "You know as well as anyone that death comes with being a hero, they need to learn how to move past it." Present Mike sighed and scowled at the pupils, saying, "Still." Midoriya was the only student in the class to actually experience death on a mission, and he wasn't present. Bakugo lost patience once more and yelled, "Are you really fucking doing this again? Is this going to be a thing after every fucking time?" Uraraka glared at the blonde again, wiping away tears as she growled, "What does it matter to you?" Ignoring the increasingly irate expressions of his classmates, Katsuki glared at the girl and growled, "If I'm being forced to watch alternate versions of that nerd, I'd rather not do it with a bunch of whiny bitches." Ochako got up and started to walk toward it with a clenched fist, but she stopped when a hand gently grabbed her by the shoulder. "Seriously? What is your problem? You just watched someone die and you act like we're the ones that are in the wrong for actually feeling something," she screamed. Iida scowled at the girl with brown hair and said softly, "That's enough, Uraraka." The gravity user started to say, "You can't be serious, Iida. Deku's your friend and he's just," but the blue-haired boy interrupted. Tenya closed his eyes and wiped away the tears that were welling up around his eyes. "Midoriya is my friend and I've learned a lot from him since we've met. Like there is no point in feeling angry about what you can't change and not to focus on the past or you'll be stuck in it," Tenya sighed. But, Uraraka stumbled as she tried to defend herself. Yaoyorozu stood up and gracefully wiped away her own tears, saying, "Iida is right. Midoriya wouldn't want us fighting among ourselves, our version or any other. Ochako pouted and complained, let's just watch the next world. He turned to the floating screen and said, play universe. Denki yelled, hey, it was my turn. But Jiru jabbed him with her earphone jack, causing him to yell back. Kyoka sighed and rolled her eyes, saying, oh, stop being a baby. You can get the next one. Realm display function activated. Universe OWCH634IMVSS is ready. Audio loading, visual loading, etc. The screen displayed what appeared to be a South American town on a hillside with buildings of various colors. The picture gradually moved to an orange building with the words, Panaderia Las Nieblas, written above the doorway that held two green doors. A young girl emerged from the shop with a small bag that jingled with the sound of coins as the right door creaked open. Mama, stop treating me like a baby. I'm not a baby anymore, the girl cried as she entered the porch. A woman's voice called out from inside the store, listen to me, Maiha, get the flour and get back quickly, no stops. The girl whimpered, fine, before stomping off. She turned around for a moment, fumbling for the right words to yell, then sighed and kept walking away. Kaminari scratched his head and said, where are they? It looks like South America, Momo exclaimed with delight, her eyes glimmering with anticipation. Looking at her friend, Mina said, huh? How do you know, y'all Momo? The wealthy girl practically bounced in her chair at the recollection. My parents and I vacationed there 1 year. Oh, the landscape is beautiful, she said. Toru turned to face the taller girl and said, okay, but where's Midoriya? Aren't these supposed to be about him? Nezu calmly grinned at the screen and said, I'm sure he will turn up. It's more than likely that that girl will have some kind of importance to the events to come. Every day, no longer a child, and nowhere near grown up, she is at a crossroads. The woman's voice sighed as Alejandra ascended the stairs that were visible from the shop's interior before the screen cut to her at the top. Present Mike raised an eyebrow and said, narration? That's new. Cementos rubbed his chin and remarked, it's more like someone is telling a story than watching an event. The voice went on, I tell her about the heroes that once saved our world time and time again, because I want to give her hope, even if the existence of heroes has been made illegal. Alejandra kicked a can before pausing in front of several destroyed posters, one of which featured a familiar green-haired man, older, with a more muscular frame and chiseled jaw, with the words, Los Protectors. As he and the others in the room gazed at the screen with wide eyes, Kirishima stammered, wait, what? A world with no heroes? Kaminari asked, startled. Tsuyu scowled at the screen and questioned, but why would they do that? Aizawa closed his eyes and sighed, there's no point in questioning their decision. We don't know what has happened in that world. Before licking her lips at the picture on the poster, Midnight remarked, in any case, that boy ages really well. Eraserhead rolled his eyes and moaned, settle down. He vaguely noticed his female students blush. Alejandra winced as she entered an open space, the evening air filled with the clanking of metal on metal and almost insane laughter. The screen displayed 3 men huddled around a metallic object, laughing joyfully as they stomped and kicked on it. But, I'm afraid that she will be forced to make a choice that will decide the direction of her life, the voice sighed. Iida fixed his glasses and nodded at the screen, declaring, it is important for kids to have proper guidance, the screen. Asui put a finger to her chin and tilted her head, thinking out loud, I wonder if that's why Bakugo turned out like this. Katsuki jumped up and started to climb over his classmates to get to the green-haired girl, but he was abruptly stopped when his teacher's scarf tightened around him and pulled him back to his seat. What did you say, you frogbit? Katsuki said. With his eyes glaring a dangerous red as he used his quirk, Aizawa moaned, language, there are still kids around. As the group continued to beat on the object, the young girl lowered her head and attempted to hurry past them. The member with the bat yelled, hey, Ale, where you going, girl? And the girl flinched as she started to walk by. No, nowhere, Alejandra nervously said as the man approached her. The man swung his arm around the terrified girl and dragged her to the object, saying, come here, you gotta see this. His golden teeth gleamed in the street lamp light as he laughed, ha ha, nowhere's right. Present Mike nervously said, this doesn't exactly seem like the safest place for a kid to be late at night. Midnight sighed, her mother did seem worried about letting her go out so late. The girl muttered, as she hesitantly followed the man's pull. The group's vocalist pointed his metal-covered bat at the object and then thrust it into the girl's hands, saying, here, look at this thing. Give him what he deserves. I don't know, Alejandra mumbled as a humanoid machine looked up at her, pale blue eyes looking up as if it were pleading for mercy as sparks jumped across its body. With horror, May gazed at the technological wonder and cried, "That poor baby." Yayorozu muttered to herself, "It looks so sad," as she observed the machine, nearly experiencing its feelings. "Maybe there are sentient machines in this world?" Todoroki said as he stared blankly at the screen. Mina glared at the screen and said, "That's horrible. That's like beating someone up then trying to force a kid to hit them too. Come on, kid, don't give in to peer pressure," Hizashi yelled, only to be shushed by the people around him. Alejandra clutched the bat closer to herself and cried out in terror, "I gotta go." But the man began laughing once more. The man began calmly, "Come on. Do it," before yelling, "It's just a bucket of bolts," and pushing her in the direction of the machine. The girl stammered as the machine continued to look on helplessly. "I have to go to the store before it closes or my mama's going to kill me." Mina exclaimed, "Woohoo! Good job, kid, don't listen to what those jerks are saying," as the class grinned at the girl's selection. Another group member laughed and grabbed the girl's coin purse, saying, "Wop, be hard without any money, Nina." The men started tossing it to one another while the girl started to chase after it. Alejandra yelled, "Hey, come on, give it back, I need it," as the men tossed the coins in a circle. The last person in the group then put a hand on the girl's head while keeping the purse slightly out of her reach. Kirishima leapt to his feet and used his quirk to harden his clenched fist, shouting, "What the hell? Leave her alone, you jerks." Rolling his eyes at the red-haired boy's antics, Bakugo sighed, "Idiot, you know they can't hear you." Eijiro sighed and sank back into his chair, saying, "I know, but still, man, she's just a kid." Shota sighed, looking at Eri sidelong. "Unfortunately, some people out there won't show mercy just because someone is just a kid. Come on." A faint shout came from under the sound of a truck's horn as vehicle pulled up, floating in the air. "Let's go! Let's go!" The driver yelled softly over the roar of the engine, gesturing for the group to approach him. The young girl yelled, "Hey!" and the men effortlessly shoved her away, jogging in the direction of the truck while stealing her money. The car sped off as soon as the three men were inside, and Alejandra ran after them. "Where are you going? My money," the girl sighed, grabbing her head before stomping her feet and screaming. Pixie Bob shook her head and sighed, "Poor kid." As the students glared at the screen, Cementos remarked sorrowfully, "Without heroes in that world. I fear that is an all too common occurrence." Alejandra started running after the truck, swerving through a nearby alley, jumping onto a dumpster, and then scaling a wall. Grunting as she landed, she moved to a dilapidated wooden wall and peered through a tiny opening in time to witness the car arrive and the men get off the back. Mina screamed, hurting the ears of those around her, "What is she doing? The money isn't worth it, kid, just let it go." People in poorer parts of the world don't get the luxury of picking how much something is worth, Miss Ashido, Nezu sadly laughed. But, she could get hurt, the pink girl tried to justify. The little animal silenced his student's argument by retorting, "But the flower was important enough for the mother to send her out in the first place. They may not have enough money to lose that amount." The girl cried out, "Ah," as she rounded the corner and confronted another thug, who collapsed with a sickening thud and moan. As the group gaped in disbelief at the man's abrupt collapse, Ciro questioned, "What happened to him?" Kaminari speculated, "Was he drunk?" but was dismissed. Another man emerged from the shadows, dropping a wooden bat with spikes as he hit the ground before being dragged back into the darkness. "No, please. No, no," came softly from another alley. Narrowing his eyes, Aizawa leaned forward and uttered, "Something's happening." "I got a bad feeling about this," Hizashi shivered, biting his nails as he watched the screen with anticipation. "Yo, go check that out." A blond man without a shirt told the other two to move back inside after three men carrying boxes left a nearby building and got onto the truck. As the men started to get closer, Alejandra gasped and hid behind a nearby box. With a trembling breath, Mineta exclaimed, "This is like something out of a horror movie," while hiding behind his hands. In his monotone voice, Todoroki asked, "Will that girl be okay?" Just as the two men passed the same location, a side view revealed a figure dragging a moaning body past a patch of wood that hardly qualified as a wall. As they knelt to check on the fallen comrade, one of the men said, "Hey, come on, Alpa, get up." However, the man who had been dragged away was thrown behind them and into a fuse box, screaming in pain and terror. As the class looked on in disbelief, Ojiro remarked, I think those guys have bigger things to worry about than a little girl. What was that? One of the men asked as the fallen member stammered to his feet, the lights flickering before shutting off, causing the men's tattoos to glow in the dark. The risen member exclaimed, "Wah!" as he glanced over his shoulder, just missing the ominous red glow of what looked like eyes before they vanished back into the shadows. Watching the screen closely, Aizawa murmured to himself, confusing and disorienting the enemy, making them more prone to fear. Present Mike turned to his colleague and asked, "What was that, Shota?" Eraserhead replied, still gazing at the screen, "Whoever that is, they are using tactics similar to an underground hero." Nezu laughed and continued to observe, saying, "Oh, I think we already know who that is." A lone dog barked in the distance, and another man asked, Did you see anything?" as they started to gather their weapons. "Who's there?" the third man shouted as they formed a circle around each other. "Enough games, Pero. Come out and fight." Bakugo smiled and bared his teeth as he called for violence, saying, "Finally some action." Uraraka narrowed her eyes at the boy and moaned, "Is fighting all you think about?" The explosion user glared at the brunette and growled, "You got a problem with that, round face?" "Enough." Their teacher's stern voice silenced the two and brought their attention back to the screen. One of the thugs' heads was illuminated by a dull red glow that pointed him in the direction of the nearby alley. However, as he turned, his eyes widened, and a powerful blow sent him flying back into a wall. When the two other members launched their swift attack, a white-haired man wearing the same attire as Izuku on the previous poster ducked beneath the green-tattooed man's swing and spun to give the pink-tattooed man a forceful elbow that sent his weapon spinning into the air and sent the man flying back. It was then revealed that the white-haired man was wearing a glowing red visor. "Is that Midoriya?" Yaoyorozu asked as she watched with wide eyes. Sato responded, equally shocked, "He's wearing the same outfit that Midoriya was on the poster." Toru muttered, "But he's so old." Her tone and posture were the only indication that she was equally perplexed. "That doesn't seem to be affecting him very much," Kaminari said tensely, wincing at the thought of taking those blows. The purple-tattooed man leapt onto Midoriya's back as he grabbed the spinning weapon from the air and slammed it across the glowing green man's head. Izuku swiftly knocked the man off with a sharp elbow, then continued his attack with a backhand. As another thug attempted to attack him from behind, the pink-tattooed man begged, "No, please, no," before the white-haired man grabbed him and threw him in the direction of the purple thug. The older Izuku turned, grabbed the purple man's attack by the wrist, and shoved him headfirst into the wall with a sickening crunch after skillfully dodging the attack and knocking out the orange-tattooed man with a single punch. With a ferocious, animalistic smile, Bakugo exclaimed, "Bahahahaha," as he watched the battle. Ochako looked worriedly at the screen and muttered to herself, "That seems a little harsh." Watching the fight intently, Aizawa corrected her, saying, "It's effective. Quick and decisive strikes, leaving no room for them to counter or call for backup." "Yeah, and they just stole from a little girl," exclaimed Mina, who seemed to be more interested in persuading herself than anyone else. With stars in his eyes, Kirishima watched the fight and muttered, "So manly." Izuku growled as he saw another gang member walk out holding another box, the blonde jumping in surprise as he saw the unconscious bodies on the ground around the old man. The shirtless thug whistled as he dropped the box he was carrying and jumped onto the truck. He then pried open a box and rummaged through the piñatas inside until he roared out a large minigun. As the blonde man opened fire, Midoriya jumped into another alley, and 3 more members showed up on the roof, each brandishing a rifle and firing down on the elderly man. "That seems like overkill," exclaimed Kaminari, staring at the screen in disbelief. As he examined the situation before him, Iida thought out loud, being fired on from so many different angles will make it difficult for him to launch a counterattack. Eri gripped Mirio's sleeve tightly, pulling it to partially conceal her face, and asked, "Is Deku going to be okay?" The blonde only gave a nervous laugh. "You are right, Iida, it will be difficult," Nezu chuckled, his calculating smile slowly spreading across his muzzle like a rodent, but not impossible. Izuku leapt out of the alley, rolled through the barrage of gunfire, and then fired 3 blue rockets at the minigun user, causing the truck to explode and scatter charred piñatas across the road. The old Midoriya ran forward, leaping off a box and spinning in midair to face them as the men on the roof covered their eyes for a moment before continuing to fire. A hologram that highlighted and targeted each of the thugs appeared over his face when he touched the side of his visor. Before landing on a dumpster, Izuku fired 3 shots, denting the lid as each bullet struck a man, sending them tumbling from the structure. Kirishima covered his eyes with his forearm and cried, so manly, tears streamed down his cheeks. Gazing in awe at the man on the screen, Yaoyorozu exclaimed, incredible. He moved into the space between their gunfire, targeted each of them, and took them all down within seconds of each other. Leaning back in his chair, Snipe laughed and said, kid's got himself some talent. Yeah, okay, but did you see that baby? It was some kind of auto-targeting system. Mei exclaimed as she bounced happily in her seat. Powerloader sighed as his student started talking to herself about how the visor functions. I know what you were thinking, and you are out of your mind if you think I'm going to let you near firearms, he said. The street glowed a dull orange as Midoriya climbed out of the dumpster, the burning truck behind him, and slowly made his way to one of the men he had knocked out earlier, the bodies of the thugs falling to the ground around him. With a burning piñata in hand, Izuku approached the tattooed man who was frantically crawling away and said, oh no, no no, no 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 no, please, please please please. These aren't your streets any more, Izuku growled, punctuating each sentence with a vicious blow to the head with the smoldering party toy. Alejandra screamed as the man went limp, and Midoriya growled at her. With every blow, Ciro winced and jokingly said, and right back to being brutal. Sato started to feel uneasy with each consecutive blow and asked, are all of these going to be a roller coaster? Tiger watched the girl tremble in fear and sighed, that definitely isn't making the girl feel safe. The young girl screamed, no, please, as she attempted to crawl away, but a second truck pulled up beside the burning car. Get on the truck. A gang member shouted as he leapt off the truck and quickly helped some of his comrades get on board. Let's go. Izuku roared, you don't get off that easy, and charged at the car. Toru questioned, why is he more worried about the criminals than the scared kid? It was odd to see an Izuku so indifferent to other people. Remember, heroes were banned in this world. Nezu responded with solemnity. In response, it seems this Midoriya has taken up a more callous vigilante approach to crime. Eat this! Exclaimed a man with orange tattoos as he threw a grenade at Midoriya after removing its pin. Alejandra screamed, ah, as she frantically attempted to crawl away from the grenade as it landed next to her. As they began to drive away, Izuku glanced back at her and then at the truck, the grenade beeping quickly before exploding and filling the street with smoke and flames. Tsuyu tilted her head and asked, why was he hesitating? Midnight sighed and put her head down, wondering what kind of world they were witnessing. He's probably been fighting villains for so long without civilians around that he has had to make the choice between the two. More than likely he's used to just focusing on the enemy without having to worry about other people. Aizawa looked sideways at his colleague and said, that's oddly profound for you. Bakugo crossed his arms and snorted, her own fault for getting in the way. Ignoring the blonde's growl, Ochako rolled her eyes and muttered, that's your opinion? Shocker. With his back to the screen, Midoriya slid across the dust and ash-covered ground. The formerly green-haired man groaned and grunted as he slowly dropped to his knees, revealing Alejandra in his arms, unharmed. As Izuku stood up, clutching his side in pain, the young girl scooted backwards and gazed at him with wide eyes. With a gasp and a growl, Midoriya stumbled to his feet, clenching his fist and using his right hand to hold his left side while snapping his head to the spot where the truck had fled. Katsuki moaned, his expression expressionless, see? You were all worried about nothing. Ignoring Bakugo, Class 1A grinned as they saw the girl come out unscathed. Some things never change. Knowing that their students would still make the right decision, most of the teachers grinned as well. Knowing that their Deku wasn't the only one who was prepared to go to any lengths to save people made Eri and Kota happy. The girl looked down and then back to the injured man, saying in a shocked voice, You saved me, why? Izuku growled and snapped his head back to Alejandra, causing the girl to recoil in response. He said softly, I guess old habits die hard. Yagi grinned broadly and laughed, that's one way to put it. Ignoring All Might's trembling, Nezu remarked thoughtfully, once a hero, always a hero. The man was thinking of his former mentor. Midoriya threw something at the girl and said, Run home kid, it ain't safe out here. After catching the object, Alejandra soon discovered it was her coin purse, which had been taken from her. As the man turned around and picked up his rifle before starting to leave, the girl yelled, You're one of those heroes, aren't you? And jumped to her feet. After only 2 steps, Izuku stopped with his back to the girl, glanced over his shoulder, and said somberly, Not anymore. Before vanishing into the alley's shadows. As she watched him disappear, the girl said, I think you are, in a hopeful and admiring tone. The screen then turned black. Ochako exclaimed, "Way to go, Deku. Midoriya is still the hero in any world." "Manly," Kirishima muttered once more. Zero asked his red-haired classmate, "Are you okay? You just keep saying that over and over again." Kaminari said, his voice lost in the din of the room, "Wait, how did he know that purse was hers?" Midnight licked her lips and laughed to herself as she saw her students blush once more. "I still wish we could have seen him in action when he was younger," she remarked. Alejandra ran down the street as quickly as she could while carrying a bag of flowers, but she missed the earlier poster. The girl turned quickly, picked up the poster, and carried it with her as she made her way home. The young girl heard her mother say, "You're late, Iha. I've been worried sick," as she pulled open her door. Alejandra said as she shut the door, "Oh, I'm sorry, Mama, but you won't believe what happened tonight. Los Muertos, they came, and they took my money." As her mother recounted again, the girl's voice trailed off, "And then there are the times when I see her smile and the hope in her eyes, and I think maybe I don't need to worry about Alejandra after all." The older Izuku was seen watching from the rooftops above as the camera gradually moved away from the bakery, confirming Alejandra's safe return. After finishing his task, Izuku vanished into the night once more, leaving the camera fixed on the moon as the screen became static. Present Mike grinned broadly and said, "Well, we got a happy ending for a change." Aizawa shook his head and sighed, "As happy as it can get, heroes are still illegal in that world." Mina pouted at her teacher and cheered, "Oh, come on, at least no one died." The black-haired man moaned as he dropped to the ground and said, "Whatever. I'm taking a nap." Tenya adjusted his glass and remarked, "Well, it seems Midoriya, in any world, can't stop himself from helping others." Bakugo ignored the class president's gasp and the other students' glares as he taunted, "Whatever helps you sleep at night, 4 eyes." Kaminari yelled again, "Seriously, how did he know it was her purse?" but was once again ignored. Kaminari raised his voice and threw his hands in the air, insisting, "I'm telling you, it doesn't make any sense that he knew it was her purse." Bakugo roared, glaring harshly at the lightning user, "No one cares, dunce face." Zero put a gentle hand on Denki's shoulder and remarked, "Yeah, man, you've been going on for like 4 years. The electrification user sighed and slumped into his chair, saying, "It's barely been 5 minutes." Mineta responded as if he were stating the obvious, leaning back in his chair and looking up when he noticed a flash of color appear in the air before it vanished as quickly. "Huh? What the?" he asked. "It's called hyperbole, dude." Kaminari turned to his short, perverted friend and exclaimed, "I know that. Before observing the great boy's perplexed expression and asking, "You good?" Minoru shouted, "I just saw something," and pointed haphazardly into the air, attracting the attention of the other boys. Hanta deadpanned at the void, mirroring the bored expressions of the other boys. Dude, there's nothing there." In defense, the human grape screeched, "I swear, there was something there," and the 3 rolled their eyes. Tilting her chair back to lean into her group of friends, Mina asked her fellow female students, "So, what other worlds do you think we'll see?" Juru casually twirled her earlobe around her finger and remarked, "I mean, we could literally see anything. We watched Green trick some kind of giant space god. Nothing is off limits anymore." "I'd like to see him a little more familiar," Uraraka said, prodding her lower lip as she pondered, "Maybe there are some worlds closer to our own." With her tongue slightly protruding from her mouth and her head cocked to the side, Suyu asked, "Maybe there is a world where Midoriya and Bakugo get along?" Toru bounced in her seat and exclaimed, "Oh, what if there's a world where he has a girlfriend?" Ashido squealed with delight and slammed all the chair legs down. Who do you think he'd end up dating?" she asked, causing all the girls to blush profusely and let their imaginations run wild. As she observed the students chatting among themselves, Midnight thought, "It's nice seeing them unwind and relax." She laughed when she saw the girls' faces flush. Hizashi laughed as he observed the pupils, adding, "It helps that we finally got to see a universe with a happier ending." Cementos tapped his chin thoughtfully, "Still, I can't help but feel we're forgetting something." Readjusting his hat, Snipe said, "I know what you're talking about. Like something is missing." Toshinori attempted to reassure the two by saying, "Well, it's not like we can really do anything about it now, can we?" "I guess not," the two sighed, attempting to get rid of the odd sensation. "Mr. Mirio?" Aries' gentle tug on the third-year student's sleeve caught the teacher's attention. May I play the Uniters, Univer, world thingy?" she asked. "Universe, sweetheart, and of course, Tagata corrected, then grinned broadly as the young girl nodded resolutely. P-Play Universe. The horned girl declared, lighting up with a smile when the screen came to life. Realm display function activated. Universe DCIJ11832JNM is ready. Audio loading, visual loading, etc. When Kaminari saw the screen turn on, he turned away from his argument with the great pervert and yelled, "Wait, wah? Oh, come on, it was my turn." Juru interrupted the boy's whining, hardening her glare as she saw the young girl shrink back a little. "Don't be a baby," she said. Denki pouted at his short friend, who started to argue, but the pout quickly turned into a glare, silencing him. "This is your fault." As she held three men bound in a golden, glowing rope, a stunning woman with long black hair, a golden chest plate, and a tiara spoke into an earpiece. "The Joker is no longer in Metropolis. He's stolen a submarine with Harley Quinn." Toru looked at the screen in apparent bewilderment and said, "Joker? What kind of name is that? Is it like Miss Joke?" The idea of a second joke made Aizawa mutter, "God, I hope not." Looking at his fellow educators, Snipe proposed, "Well, he apparently stolen a sub, so is he a criminal?" Sato scowled and said, "But why steal a submarine? Is it just for a joyride or something?" For the first time, Koda uttered the words, maybe it's for some kind of J-joke? He is called the J-Joker." Kirishima scratched his cheek and said, "What kind of joke would you need a submarine for?" "Maybe if you idiots ever shut the hell up, we'd find out." Bakugo growled, not bothering to even look away from the screen. Through his own earpiece, a muscular man in a blue uniform with a red cape heard the woman say, "They took Lois with them." The black-haired man frowned and gritted his teeth as he pushed himself through the air, breaking the sound barrier with ease as he turned around. The costumed man quickly reached the water, and as he flew into the open ocean, his speed easily displaced the water. The man stopped over the water, seemingly at random, and looked down until his vision cut through the waves, highlighting the submarine. "I see it," the powerful man declared before leaning forward. "Batman, one of the warheads is missing." The students' eyes widened as they exclaimed, "So fast," in disbelief. "That speed is insane." Zero gasped in surprise, his mouth dropping. Ojiro said, "I don't think even All Might is that fast," and received nods in agreement. Momo held her chin tenderly and thought to herself, "And that appears to be X-ray vision. Does he have multiple powers?" Todoroki shrugged, adhering to the principal's advice to maintain an open mind. "Seems like it." Tiger muttered, observing the man's response, "So, I'm guessing he must know this, Lois, and they must be pretty close, based on his reaction." Mina smiled widely and exclaimed, "Oh, Batman, is this another Bad Doria universe?" The group froze in terror as Mandalay abruptly asked, "Wait, warhead? As in nuclear warhead?" The man with the hair plunged into the water, swiftly overtaking the aquatic vehicle and passing beneath it. As the submarine broke through the water, the screen showed the sea's surface breaking apart. However, the submarine continued to rise and eventually emerged from the water, revealing the strong man lifting the entire submarine out of the ocean. Before slamming the machine onto the solid ground, the man in the costume effortlessly flew it back to the dock. The powerful man burst through the hull and dove into the submarine, finding it filled with a strange, green gas, but he paid it no mind as he looked around before running deeper into the craft. "So strong!" the audience exclaimed once more, shock reverberating throughout the space. "Could you have lifted that?" Mirio asked All Might, both of their eyes wide as they stared at the screen. Yagi shook his head and sighed, briefly bemoaning the loss of his former abilities. "Not nearly that easily." Kyoka frowned slightly at the oddly colored air and said, "But what's with that gas?" Denki said, "Maybe that's the joke?" And the other students looked at him with curiosity. "Subs give you gas," he said. Katsuki yelled, "I think we should revoke your right to talk." The group groaned and agreed. The caped man dashed into a room with two other individuals, both wearing gas masks and one dressed as a nurse in a purple suit and the other in a red and white outfit. As they both turned around, the man in the purple suit removed a glove to reveal a recognizable head of green hair. The dark-haired man stared at the two, shaking his head as the world started to warp and his breathing became labored. With a shake, the faces of the two mask-wearing people changed into skulls and back again. The two others raised their hands defensively and moved aside as a huge creature rose up in response to the powerful man's demand. "Where is she?" With each thunderous step, the enormous creature's face changed as it started to approach the man in the blue suit. "Midoriya." Everyone yelled in shock once more as they saw their friend's face painted white like a clown. Mina asked, utterly bewildered, "Wait, Midori is the Joker. But what about Batman? I thought he was Midori." Jiro shrugged and said, "Maybe it's a different Batman." But she froze when she realized something. "Wait, does this mean Green is a villain?" she asked. "Maybe he just pulls pranks or something." Ochako asked in vain hope for her friend. "If he's called the Joker, maybe he's not that bad." "So, I guess that girl is Harley Quinn?" Mashirao asked as he frowned at the screen. Mineta drooled, "She's kinda hot," before Suyu silenced her with a tongue slap. Iida scowled at his friend's evil counterpart and said gravely, "None of that matters, he's still a villain. More important, what is with those hallucinations? Perhaps that gas is a hallucinogenic?" Aizawa interrupted his students, saying, "Even that doesn't matter. More importantly, where is this Lois and what is with that creature?" Staring at the monster, Midnight sighed, "If it's stepping up to that man, it must be powerful." The superpowered man charged the beast, swiftly grabbed it, and then flew upwards, dragging the monster through the hull and into the sky. "Doomsday!" The blue-eyed man yelled defiantly, but Doomsday responded with a roar that rocked the submarine. "No, I will not let you hurt anyone," the man said. "So that thing's name is Doomsday," Mineta squeaked, trembling with fear at the thought of something strong enough to be called Doomsday. Pixie Bob summarized, "Whatever it is, it's clearly strong enough that even that man is afraid he can't protect people with it around," and wondered what kind of power it had. Aizawa muttered in a rough voice, "But that begs the question, why is that thing with the problem child?" Looking at his friend, Hizashi said, "Maybe he has it for that flying guy? Like some kind of bodyguard or distraction?" "If that were the case, then why did he need the submarine, or the gas?" Nezu asked, narrowing his eyes at the screen. "It feels like we are missing a piece of the puzzle." "Time to go now, honey." Joker sighed, turning to the blonde as they exited the sub through the hole the powerful man had made. "Good guys are coming, and they tend to get punchy." Harley cried out, "Ah," as the two turned to leave, laughing, only to be seized by a hand of green energy that glowed and thrown into a nearby car. A man in a green suit exclaimed, "You're not going anywhere," as Batman and the woman with black hair swiftly trailed behind him. "Oh, it's Batman," Mina cried, jumping in her seat and pointing at the screen. Observing that the man beneath the cowl was in fact a different person, Shoji remarked, "But that's definitely not another version of Midoriya." "Interesting, so in one universe Midoriya is the Batman, but in another he is this Joker." Nezu pondered. "Fascinating. Like two halves of the same coin, perhaps?" Batman used a device to analyze the gas and said, "Scarecrow's fear toxin, mixed with kryptonite particles." Before approaching the restrained Izuku and asking, "What did you do?" "I'm pulling the best joke ever. It will be my masterpiece." Midoriya, who was dressed as a clown, snarled before bursting into wild laughter as Batman's face changed to one of horror and realization. With his head cocked to the side, Eijiro questioned, "Fear toxin? What's that do make things scarier?" "Maybe," Momo replied, scowling at the screen as well. "But, what is this? Kryptonite? I've never heard of it." The girl recoiled as Todoroki said, "That's not important." The class turned to face him. "What matters is..." As he narrowed his eyes at the screen, Bakugo interrupted the bicolored boy's thought, "If this is some kind of joke, then what's the punchline?" Batman touched a communicator and said, "Superman, stop, whatever you're seeing." As the screen displayed Superman soaring into orbit and pushing Doomsday in front of him. "It's not real," Batman said. "Not real?" Hagakure asked, shifting in her chair and sounding perplexed. "What is he talking about?" she asked. "Yeah," exclaimed Minoru, gesturing to the screen as though accusing it of something. "We saw that monster ourselves." "If that wasn't real, what was it?" Iida asked, looking down as he rubbed his chin. Ragdoll's eyes widened in horror as she whispered, "It couldn't be." Superman's expression changed to one of silent shock as he took in the man's words. The customed man let go of Doomsday and watched it slowly, lifelessly float away from him. The image of a brown-haired woman with a new, deep cut stapled close on her chest gradually replaced the monstrous vision as the dark-haired man blinked slowly. The man flew over to the woman and took her in his arms, his face displaying disbelief. The superpowered man stared at the cut on the woman's chest, his X-ray vision peering through the wound and showed her heart, a strange device with a green light attached to the beating organ. Yaomomo's eyes widened in horror as she covered her mouth, gasping, "Wah what?" Kirishima stared in shock and said, "Wait, who's that?" That must be Lois, Tomoko replied, sadly observing the screen. She was already aware of the extent of some people's cruelty. That toxin must have made this Superman hallucinate her as that monster, Iida remarked solemnly, adjusting his glasses while assembling the parts. But what is that device on her heart? He muttered. But why? Toru managed to squeak out, not turning her gaze from the man holding the woman on the screen. Bakugo responded, gritting his teeth and glaring at the screen. That was his plan all along. That's his idea of a fucking joke. Uraraka turned away from the screen and glared at the ashy blonde, saying, how is this a fucking joke? She could die. Katsuki glared at the brown-haired teenager and yelled back, I never said it was fucking funny, round cheeks. Besides, he's a villain, he wouldn't care. How long can someone survive in space? Mina asked, trying to maintain hope. And maybe she'll be okay. The beating of a heartbeat monitor sounded off throughout a clock tower, matching the rhythm of Lois's heart. Superman kept staring at the unconscious woman's heart while a device that had been hastily taped to a wall displayed the beating. The machine in the watchtower beeped loudly one final time, and the gadget on the brown-haired woman's heart turned red as the strong man watched her heart finally stop beating. When Midnight realized what was going to happen, she gasped, no. Shino and Toga covered Ares and Koda's eyes. Aizawa told his pupils, cover your eyes, now, but they ignored him because it was too late. The tower was reduced to dust by a terrible explosion, and the people who were peacefully strolling down the street were engulfed in a dazzling light before being reduced to ash. When two businessmen noticed the explosion, they turned away from a table and peered out the window as the atomic light bathed them, causing their flesh to burn away before their skeletons did. Couples walking in the park turned to the thunderous noise as they too were consumed by the expanding inferno. Nobody had a chance to run, to scream, to realize what was going on. The three heroes looked away from Harley and the Joker, staring in disbelief and bewilderment at the growing ball. No one could speak because every word they attempted to form died in their throats. Everyone gazed at the destruction in abstract horror. Neither the normally combative Bakugo nor the stoic Todoroki were able to hide the expression of complete shock and terror. Everyone just stared, frantically attempting to make sense of what they were witnessing and to discover some kind of logic. The Joker exclaimed, "Ta-da!" before erupting into wild giggles that soon turned into full-fledged laughter. As he surrounded the group with a bubble of energy, the green heroes exclaimed, "Brace yourselves." They never looked away as they watched the explosion continue to grow, engulfing and destroying the city skyline. Entire skyscrapers were engulfed and torn apart, and as the barrier finished forming, the shockwave finally reached them, rushing past and covering everything as the screen was consumed by a burning white. "Ta-ad," Katsuki roared, leaping from his seat with enough for to knock his chair over as he glared at the screen with nothing but pure hatred. "That's all you have to say, you fucking circus freak. I'll fucking kill you myself." With disdain in his eyes, Todoroki snarled, "For once I agree." Unsure of what to believe anymore, Mineta croaked, That didn't just happen, right? I'm dreaming, right? Though, normally my dreams have far more boobs." With no strength to even acknowledge the pervert's statement, Asui asked, "What just happened?" With shocked and terrified eyes, Yayorozu realized, the missing warhead. He rigged it to Lois's heartbeat, and when she died. With his eyes fixed on the screen, Aizawa concluded, it went off. He then tricked Superman into killing her himself, in order to cause the bomb to detonate. Uraraka started to say, but Deku would never, but Bakugo interrupted her. The explosive blonde snarled, still staring at the screen, and at this point, I wouldn't even call him human. We've been over this, round face, that's not the fucking Deku we know. Ochako found herself agreeing with the bold adolescent rather than arguing with him. Another version of their friend had been portrayed as a villain, but this was something entirely different, like a sick, twisted joke. Batman's voice said, "You took his wife," as Superman, holding Lois's body tenderly, stepped down into the flaming crater that had once been a city. The brown-haired woman's hand dropped to her side, revealing a golden ring with a large diamond adorning it, while Superman fell to his knees as smoke and ash filled the air and embers fell from the sky. Batman went on, "You took his unborn child and his city," as the costumed hero softly placed his hand on the woman's stomach in response to the crackling flames throughout the destroyed city. With tears in her eyes at what she saw, Ryuko muttered, she was pregnant. With tears streaming down her cheeks and exposing her facial features, Toru exclaimed, "How could anyone be so cruel?" They asked themselves, the question was not answered. Batman leaned over a table to distance himself from the Joker, who was now in what looked to be a police interrogation room, and snarled, "Why?" The green-haired man looked at the frowning man and said, "After all these years, Batsy, you really need reasons from me?" With a broad, insane smile. "Why do this to him?" The Dark Knight retorted, leaning into the clown whose smile never wavered. "This has always been about us." Still standing and staring at the screen, Bakugo yelled, "Who the fuck cares? Just kill the bastard." "Bakugo, enough," Tenya yelled, turning to confront the irate boy. The explosive blonde swung his rage at the bifocal boy and exclaimed, "What, you can't tell me he doesn't deserve it?" The class president stood up to confront the shorter boy and explained, "No one's saying that, no one could say that," but he matched the blonde's glare with his own. "But everyone is already in shock and trying to process what just happened, and you yelling and cursing is not helping." Katsuki started to move forward, saying, "Like I give a she," but was interrupted. With a scowl of his own, Aizawa wrapped the two in his scarf and commanded, "Enough, both of you, sit down, arguing will do no one any good." "It appears that you were correct," Snipe remarked to Nezu, trying to divert attention while the pupils obeyed their teacher's instructions. "They do have some sort of connection." "Yes, it appears that the two are connected in some way," the principal said, frowning deeply as he watched the screen. But, Toshinori asked, naively hoping that anything would divert the mammal's attention from this deranged incarnation of his successor. Nezu said grimly, his eyes taking on a calculating gleam, "This Batman seems more concerned by who he targeted rather than what he did." Ectoplasm asked, wanting his boss to explain, "Which means?" The principal paused, gathering his thoughts and stealing his vision, before saying, "Which means that this version might be well established for acts of insanity." Joker growled back, leaning in with his big smile before getting up and moving toward the one-way glass, where he stared at his own reflection. "So, I thought I'd try a game on easy mode for once. And it was as easy as beating a puppy to death with a kitten," Joker said, "because every time you and I play, I lose." Batman kept his eyes fixed on the table with a deep frown while the Joker burst out laughing. "Eek!" Koji squeaked, recoiling in his chair as everyone's expressions went white. "I think I'm going to be sick," Rikito said in a whisper, sounding like he was shouting as everyone nodded in agreement. The black-haired woman whispered, "Kal-El, Clark," as she lightly touched Superman's shoulder while he held his deceased wife in silence. "I killed them," Clark said gravely, his eyes full of despair. "Diana." Defiantly, Diana pulled her hand away and raised her eyebrows, saying, "No, that madman orchestrated this. He's responsible, only him." "Will you keep her safe?" Kal-El asked, holding his wife against his chest and resting his head against her again. As Superman leapt into the air and took off with a loud boom, the female hero reassured, "Of course." She took the dead victim in her arms. Pixie Bob exclaimed in confusion, "The hell? Why isn't she stopping him?" Looking up at his aunt, Koda asked, "Stopping him?" He was unsure of what had happened because his eyes were covered, only that it was awful. Rubbing the child's back, the telepath hero explained, "That man has suffered an immeasurable loss. He needs to be given time to grieve, or he may do something he'd regret." Bakugo muttered under his breath, "Whatever he does is too good for that clown-faced bastard," which went unnoticed by everyone but further perplexed the kids. The green-suited superhero flew up beside Clark over a field of crops and asked, "Superman, are you okay?" With a barely controlled rage in his voice, Kal-El growled, "Where is he? Where is the Joker?" The man with brown hair replied, "But I don't think you should be anywhere near him. Batman took him to Arkham Asylum." Instead of responding, Superman pushed himself to move more quickly, breaking the sound barrier and frightening the other hero. The dark-haired man was surrounded by a green bubble as the Emerald Man caught up to him and sent glowing energy after him. As he soared in front of the bubble with his arms raised in a soothing gesture, the green hero pleaded, "You've had an unfathomable loss. You need time to process it." Yawara sighed and shook his head slightly, saying, "At least someone gets it." With a somewhat optimistic expression, Uraraka said, "Arkham Asylum. That sounds like mental hospital. Maybe they'll get that Deku help. Maybe he'll get better?" With a conflicted expression, Momo reluctantly agreed, "Maybe. He does seem extremely mentally unstable, but given what he has done." The class cringed as Iida concluded solemnly, "It may not be possible to rehabilitate him." After giving the other hero a fierce look through the energy bubble, Superman threw back his fist and crashed through the barrier. Energy brimmed to be released as the man in the green suit grunted as the shield broke and he pointed his fist at Clark again. Kal-El's hand flicked across the brown-haired hero before anything could happen. The black-haired man opened his hand to show a green ring in his palm. and the Emerald Hero watched in disbelief. The smaller hero in a brown flight suit emerged when the green suit vanished, and he then started to fall to the ground while yelling. The depowered man was caught by Superman, who swooped down and placed him gently on the ground. The brown-haired man turned to Clark and begged, "Please don't do something you'll regret for the rest of your life." Superman corrected, slowly retreating before taking off, leaving the man to gape at him. "I already have." But he didn't do anything," exclaimed Mina, perplexed by what Superman had said. "He was drugged, yes, but that was part of the Joker's plan," Aizawa elaborated, sighing as he closed. He knew how Superman would react and used that against him. There were things he could have done differently, but he rushed in and played into the Joker's hands. While Hizashi scowled at his friend, Nomori scowled at her colleague, asking, "Isn't that a bit harsh?" "No, it's not." Eraserhead responded with a stern tone, turning to, "I'm not saying he is at fault. No one could blame him for what happened, but it's clear he is suffering from some form of survivor's guilt and thinking of what he could have done differently and blaming himself for the choices he did make." "Amazing. I wonder what it uses as a power source," Hatsume murmured to herself as she observed the green hero's abilities connected to the ring. "Okay, but that appears to be some kind of hard light projector contained in a ring. What do you think he'll become, a god who deluded himself into believing he was just a man? What will Superman turn into?" Joker chuckled to Batman as he turned to face the frowning hero. "Someone took everything from you, didn't they? And look at what you became. The punching-kicking embodiment of wrath." Staring straight ahead while the clown paced the room, Batman assertively said, "There are some things even you can't corrupt, Joker." The green-haired man laughed and continued to smile widely at the hero, saying, "Oh, Batsy. It only took me one bad day to become this, and your pal Superman just had one very bad day. Do you honestly think he'll still be fun to play with?" he asked. "Oh, one day?" Denki exclaimed in disbelief, his mouth hanging open and his eyes blazing with fury. "It only took him one bad day to become that monster?" Nezu sighed, lowering his head and closing his eyes gently. "Unfortunately, that may be more true than it sounds." What do you mean?" Jiro nervously asked, glancing at the principal and nearly terrified of the response. As he opened his eyes to meet his students, the strange mammal explained solemnly, "People are not simply born as villains, most are merely victims of circumstance. Most are, as he said, one bad day away from becoming, as Kaminari put it, monsters." As Katsuki and Yagi reflected on their interactions with the green-haired boy, they thought, one bad day. Unknowingly recalling the same day, Toshinori recalled telling the boy to give up on his dreams, and Bakugo recalled encouraging the boy with green hair to make a swan dive off a roof. "He'll grieve," Batman answered defiantly, narrowing his eyes at the Joker, "but he will continue to be the best man I know." The clown laughed and pointed his handcuffed hands at the frowning man before sitting down once more. "Oh no, this time the joke is on you," he exclaimed. "And the world shall burn." The dark-themed hero opened his mouth to respond as the building and the room shook, and the green-haired man burst out laughing like a crazy person again. Batman looked around in disbelief as the Joker kept laughing and dust began to fall as if the room itself had started to fall apart. The wall behind Batman was suddenly destroyed by a blast, and when the dust settled, Superman was standing there with menacing red eyes. "Shit." Pixie Bob clicked her tongue and whispered. Leaning forward in his seat, Bakugo growled and practically cheered, "Time to pay, you circus reject." He was excited to witness karma in action. Tomoko frowned anxiously at the screen and questioned, why didn't anyone warn Batman Superman was coming? Raising an eyebrow at his teammate, Tiger asked, would he have been able to do anything if they had? The guy was literally called a god and neither one argued with it. "What's going to happen now, Mirio?" Eri asked, gazing at the third-year student with big, teary eyes. She couldn't understand why everyone was against this Deku when they had previously all supported him. The normally energetic teen didn't say anything, merely swallowing the lump in his throat as he and Sosaki moved their hands to cover the children's eyes quickly if necessary. "Get away from him," Superman demanded, cutting off the Joker's laughter. As Clark approached the table where the green-haired man sat slowly, Batman snarled and raised a hand in an attempt to calm the powerful creature. "I'm handling this." The clown exclaimed, "Woohoo!" as Kal-El casually threw the table aside, reached down, grabbed the villain by the collar, and then slammed his back against the glass. Superman growled, "You drugged me, made me," before lowering his head in sorrow. "Lois, my son." Unusually serious, Joker said, "First Krypton, now Metropolis." Then he laughed, saying, People you love tend to blow up, don't they? Everyone stared in disbelief as Katsuki yelled, "The fuck you say?" at the green-haired man's boldness. "That is so not manly," Kirishima cried, his body involuntarily tensing up in rage. Tenya lowered his head and glared at the screen, growling through clenched teeth. First he blows up a city, now he mocks him. How can anyone be this twisted? He asked. The principal muttered to himself, Krypton. Desperate for a diversion, the former #1 hero asked, "What was that, sir?" Nezu clarified without glancing at the hero. Joker mentioned a place. Krypton. But I have never heard of it. However, from what he said we can infer that it too had been blown up. Wait, you don't think he was? Present Mike stammered, staring at the screen with his sunglasses sliding down his nose. Shota went on, his voice cold and venomous. He was possibly trying to trigger any lingering PTSD as well as worsen his self-blaming by drawing similarities between the two incidents, likely trying to target any survivor's guilt Superman may have. Midnight clenched her teeth and sighed, trying to comprehend that this was a different version of her sweet, cinnamon roll of a student. That is just pure evil. Batman yelled, "Superman don't," as Clark reeled his fist back. The strong man grunted and quickly adjusted his fist, shattering the glass. "Hey. That's why I like you're much more gullible than." Joker laughed, placing a hand on Kal-El's shoulder and giving the Dark Hero a nod when he was done. "Raw!" Superman roared, throwing the clown across the room, his body slamming into the wall before falling onto the table, breaking it. With sparks flying from his hands, Kachan yelled, "Yes! Fuck him up!" "I can't believe I'm agree with Bakugo about watching Midoriya get beat up," Kaminari chuckled, earning glares from his female classmates. "What? I like Midoriya as much as the next guy, but you guys can't tell me this version doesn't deserve this." The girls bit their lower lip, unable to disagree with Kaminari but disliking seeing the green-haired hero suffer, but their homeroom teacher intervened and ended the argument, saying, "That's enough." Joker mockingly said, "You think you can have a family? That locking me up will magically reform me and that they'll be safe." He got up, stretched his back, went to his chair, picked it up, and sat down, saying, "So big, so dumb." Clark said nothing, just glaring at the Joker as he walked slowly by the clown who was seated. The green-haired man laughed and shooed Superman away, saying, "Now run along so that I can break out of here. I have lots of planning to do to top this." "Top this?" Mandalay gasped as the room shook with shock, fear and outrage. "He just nuked a fucking city," Bakugo exclaimed, rage blazing in his eyes. Staring at the screen in shock, Mineta exclaimed, "WWA, what more could he possibly do?" Uraraka bit her lip, as the clown made fun of what she had been hoping for. Aizawa sighed and narrowed his eyes at the screen, saying, "He's trying to provoke him." Nezu sighed, wondering hazily what had turned this Midoriya into this person. He truly is insane. Batman exclaimed, "That's enough," as Superman sprang forward, snatched the Joker by the throat, and raised him into the air. Clark casually swatted the bat-themed man away, sending him flying back and hitting his head on some debris, without bothering to turn to face his fellow hero. Choking on the steel grip around his throat, Joker wheezed out, "I know it's soon, but think you'll ever love again? Maybe you won't kill your next family." Did he just? Snipe attempted to ask as the room went deafeningly silent, everyone only able to hear the sound of their hearts beating in their chest. "How could?" Bakugo gasped, his anger vanishing in a second and being replaced with disbelief. The blonde has acted in ways he regrets and said things he regrets, but he could never have thought of anything like that. Nobody believed what they were hearing. This was pure evil and beyond insanity. Shino and Toga instinctively cover the children's eyes and ears once more, a piercing gut feeling telling them what was about to happen. "Gah!" Superman roared, glaring at the Joker with red eyes once more. The super-powered being thrusts his hand forward, piercing the clown's chest with a spray of blood. The green-haired man laughed as the air was forced out of his lungs from the blow, grinning madly at Batman as his spine burst out of his back. "I win!" the Joker exclaimed, his mouth dripping blood and his voice hoarse. As the screen went to static, the man with green hair's insane laughter gradually subsided. With a pale, horrified expression on her pink face, Mina managed to ask, "He won? How? He died." "That's precisely how he won." All Might breathed a sigh of relief while his pupils turned to him to clarify. "A hero's job is to save lives. We need to capture villains and let the justice system take care of them. We don't have the right to decide who lives and who dies, and by pushing Superman into killing him, He made him pass a line in which there is no going back. He wasn't responsible for the death of his family nor the destruction of that city, but by killing the Joker he became judge, jury and executioner. With an eyebrow raised at the former hero, Shota said through his scarf, "That's oddly profound of you." But any jury would have. Ojiro attempted to explain himself, but the principal interrupted him. But no jury did. Nezu responded with a sigh. While it's entirely possible he would have been given the death penalty, he was never given a trial. Instead, Superman killed him personally, and while no one can fault him for doing so, once you have crossed that line once it becomes easier to do so again, to push that line further and further back each time. That was the Joker's goal, to corrupt Superman, to push him beyond his morals and make him abandon his own ideals. How could any human be so heartless? Ochako murmured, attracting the attention of nearby students. But I think calling him human is a bigger joke, Todoroki sighed, his emotionless tone seeming to drip with frozen rage as he closed his eyes. He called himself the Joker. Truly a mad banquet of darkness, Tokiyami mumbled out, feeling dark shadow wrap itself around him like a blanket. For what seemed like hours, nobody spoke as they all tried to comprehend the monster that was the Joker. I think it's best if we try to move on and forget about that world, Aizawa finally sighed, turning to face the students and observing their dejected expressions. Feel free to talk amongst yourselves while I discuss with the rest of the teachers. The class sighed, forming groups and attempting to maintain halting conversations. Yes, sir. As the adults gathered together, closely monitoring the students, Mirio ushered Eri and Kota to play away from everyone else. So, what is it you wanted to discuss? Toshinori asked. Ain't it obvious? Snipe questioned with his southern drawl. We gotta decide if we are going to keep watching these or just wait around for the watcher to come back. Midnight lowered her head sorrowfully and said, if we continue to watch, we run the risk of causing more mental turmoil to the kids. But if we keep watching we can make it easier to take our minds off that world. Cementos responded with a raspy voice. It may be more beneficial to watch more and try to put that world behind us. Ectoplasm asked in a warped voice, but what if we see another world like this one? Yagi listened to his colleagues, tuning their conversation out as he turned to the students. The former pro let a smile grace his lips as the minutes ticked by. The young heroes slowly began to calm down, returning to tense yet normal conversations. Hizashi sighed and leaned back in his chair just in time to see a flash of color above the group. Huh? What the? He said. Man, no matter what we decide, Hound Dog is going to have his work cut out for him when we get back. Nomori noticed a change in the blonde's expression to one of bewilderment and asked, what's up? Present Mike pointed to the sky above them and exclaimed, I just saw something, to get everyone's attention. Minoru leapt from his seat and exclaimed, I knew I saw something. I even told you I saw something. I knew I wasn't crazy. Still unable to smile, Ciro frowned and laughed, I wouldn't go that far. Kaminari started, I still don't see anything, but interrupted himself as everyone saw a mass of colors flicker once more for a brief moment before vanishing. What the fuck was that? Bakugo exclaimed, gazing at the air with wide eyes as the flickering reappeared, this time lasting longer and more frequently. Aizawa commanded, everybody move, as the phenomenon recurred, this time lasting even longer and the shapes becoming more distinct. Mineta screamed, what's happening? As everyone snatched up their chairs and shifted to the side. What is that? Ashido asked as they saw a mass steadily fade into existence, gray mixed with splotches of colors. When the mass finally took shape, a clamor of fresh voices exclaimed, ah, and fell to the ground below. As the swarm slowly started to move, an adult male voice asked, is everyone all right? Yaoyorozu recognized a head of hair among the new group and gasped in shock. Kendo? Come on, we have to hurry. Nato urged his class through the halls, walking briskly across the linoleum a few steps ahead. We cannot allow 1A to steal the spotlight. As she walked in front of the class of girls, a girl with orange hair in a ponytail sighed and gave a gentle shake of her head. And it's your fault we're running late, she said. There is no need for playing the blame game, Kendo. Monoma dismissed, waving his hand at the girl as he dramatically turned his head away. Accidents happen. The teal-eyed ginger smirked and teased, if by accidents, you mean you having to wait to borrow Set's quirk again after you lost your... The blonde-haired boy cut him off. No need to keep bringing it up, the copy quirk user muttered to himself, his face blazing red, and exclaimed, it was an accident. A boy with indigo hair asked, why am I here again? As he moved to the middle of the class, where the boys and girls were separated. Nato proudly pointed to the other students in his class as if it were the most obvious thing in the world and said, "Well, since you'll be joining our class next year, it's important for you to get used to spending time with us." Itsuka sighed once more, attempting to reason with the perverse boy. "It isn't confirmed he will be joining our class yet." "What?" Monoma rolled her eyes and scoffed. "Do you expect me to believe he'd join that horrid Class 1 act?" "Enough of that," Kendo reprimanded, giving the blonde a light neck chop that made him gasp and stagger. As he walked behind his students, Sekijiro-kan, the blood hero, Vlad King, replied, "Regardless, you will be joining the hero course next year. Principal Nezu asked for all hero course students, and as you will be joining us next year, it is expected you'll be there." As he kept up with the group, Shinso muttered, "I guess. But why am I here?" Imajiki whispered to himself, unfortunately not going unheard. "Oh, don't be like that, Tamaki, we were already helping them train, we might as well tag along." Najire practically cheered as she leaned over the gloomy boy's shoulder, asking so many questions that she drowned out any complaints he might have had. "What do you think this is about anyways? Why do you think they asked all the first-year hero course students to be there? Do you think Mirio's there? Is Deku going to be there? Is Froppy going to be there? Do you think Uravity is going to be there? I've been meaning to ask, Shinso. How has your quirk training going?" Nato asked the brainwashing user, pausing in his steps to walk alongside the boy. "Do you think it will work on that Midoriya yet?" Hitoshi was taken aback when the blonde boy put his arm around his shoulders and stammered, "Oh, I don't know. Midoriya is the only person I've ever met that can break out of it, so it's a bit hard to test." The copy user smiled and leaned closer to the shy boy, asking, "Well, how would you feel about us testing it out? I have a plan to knock the golden boy off his ivory pedestal and act." Itsuka growled, "You leave him alone," and chopped the blonde on the neck, rendering him unconscious this time. "A little protective, ain't ya, Itsu?" The floating head of Setsuna teased as she appeared over the orange-haired girl's shoulder. "Shut up, Set," Kendo commanded, swatting at the green-haired girl's head while her face flushed. "Oh," Tokage smiled, keeping her head just out of the blushing girl's reach. "Am I wrong?" she asked. "I mean," Pony began, struggling to find the words in Japanese as she watched the class's big sister try to grab their resident troublemaker. "I no blame her." Yui's expression remained unchanged as she nodded in agreement. "He is toadstool-y cute." Komori chuckled as she hid her mouth with her hand. Abara smiled at her shorter friend and said softly, "Yes, you made that joke during our last sleepover, dear." "Well, none of you acknowledged it, shroom," Kanoko retorted, pouting and crossing her arms. Reiko whispered back, "We decided not to comment for your own good, however, you're not wrong." "What do you think they're talking about?" Juzo asked the rest of the boys as he nodded towards the females of the group. Kamakiri rolled his eyes and grunted, "Who cares? I just hope whatever we're being called to the auditorium for isn't a waste of time." Rin glanced at the other boys and said, "Speaking of which, what do you think this is about?" Shota rubbed his chin and said, "I don't know. It's gotta be important, if they asked all of us to be there." As his students got closer to a pair of double doors, Khan said, "Settle down everyone, we're here." "Kendo, would you mind waking Monoma up?" Khan asked. Itsuka sighed and swiftly shifted her focus from her friend's floating head to shaking the blonde awake. "Yes, sensei." As she floated to the front of the group and started to push the door open, Hato exclaimed, "Let's find out what this is about." Then a dazzling light burst from the room, "Wah." As the group huddled together, Kaibara exclaimed, "What's going on?" before the light swiftly engulfed them and they felt weightless as the world around them seemed to vanish. The class let out a collective, "Ah," as gravity began to pull them down again, and they could just make out a plethora of screams as they fell. "Is everyone all right?" Sekijiro asked as he began to regain his senses from the fall, earning a cacophony of pained groans. As the group of students started to separate from one another, a strangely familiar female voice asked, "Kendo?" Nomori sighed as she completed her explanation to Khan, looking at the students as they conversed and clarified things on their own. "And that's pretty much the situation." "That's a lot to take in," Vlad gasped, leaning back in his chair that was created by Yaoyorozu, vaguely noting that the other teachers mentioned that they watched 5 universes, but only described 4. "Why did you begin without us?" "Well," Yagi said, suddenly intrigued by every other direction, "why you see. We kind of forgot you were coming," Hizashi's sheepish smile concluded. After a brief pause, Sekijiro asked in a cold tone, pronouncing that one word clearly so they wouldn't miss it, "What?" As the 1A girls concluded their explanation to the newcomers, Setsuna asked, "So, you've just been spending all this time watching different versions of Parsley?" Mina shrugged and said, "Basically." She was sitting in reverse with her arms resting on the back of her chair. "I can dig it," Tokage exclaimed, a smile spreading across her face. Yui nodded to her green-haired friend's decision and said, Kendo frowned and muttered, "I don't know. This kind of seems like an invasion of privacy." "Oh, don't be like that, Itsu." Lizardy gave her class representative a knowing look as her head floated over to the ginger girl. "Now, you don't have to hide it when you stare at Parsley." "Sets!" exclaimed Itsuka, her face flushed as she swatted at the floating head with her enlarged hand. As Reiko watched the head float slightly out of the irate girl's mouth, she said, "Set, are you really one to judge?" Tokage raised an eyebrow at the reserved girl and asked, "When have I ever tried to hide my staring?" Abara looked at the other students and whispered, "Can we please not discuss this in public?" Near the boys, her cheeks turned pink. "Why?" Setsuna asked, turning her teasing grin to the religious girl. "Are you afraid we'll reveal you used to have a crush on Monoma or that you currently have a crush on Parcel Eek?" With a squeak, the playful girl retreated as Shiozaki yelled, "Shut up, Setsuna!" and sent out vines to seize the floating head. Surprised, Uraraka raised an eyebrow at the holy girl and asked, "Monoma?" The girl with vine hair sighed and returned her quirk. "I thought it was sweet how he was helping Pony learn Japanese. And then I learned what exactly he was teaching her. Speaking of which, can we talk about the disparity of the boys between classes?" Lizardy looked at the girls in Class A. "You girls get eye candy like Todoroki, a bad boy like Bakugo and an adorable boy with the body of a Greek god like Parsley. Best we get Monoma." "Yeah, but we got stuck with that gremlin, Mineta," Jiro growled in disgust, "and Kaminari isn't much better." Ochako rolled his eyes and complained, and no amount of looks can fix Bakugo's personality. Yaoyorozu sighed and scowled at the idea of the aloof boy. Unfortunately, Todoroki is still a bit distant. He's improved, but the only person he really opens up to is Midoriya. Tokage attempted to make fun of the expressionless girl by saying, "Sounds like he's right up your alley, Yui." "Not my type." Kodai replied shortly, not bothering to look at the head that floated over to her. "Oh?" Setsuna asked once more, her playful smile intensifying. "Is your type URK?" she asked. Without turning to face her, Yui grabbed the floating head and commanded, "Quiet." She was right about Midori, though. Mina cut in wistfully before giggling. "You should have seen the last time he was training shirtless. I think Ochako was going to die from a nosebleed." Uraraka pouted at her friend with pink skin and complained, "Like you were any better." Ashido dismissed it, though her cheeks took on a faint lilac hue. "Girl, I went to school with Kirishima. I've built up a tolerance." "Is that why you were drooling over green?" Kyoka chimed in, smirking as the horned girl's face turned fully lilac. "Can you say anything, Kyoka?" Toru tried to defend her friend. "You turned bright red and couldn't look at Midori for a week." "Oh," Jiro countered the invisible girl, turning to smirk at the floating clothes, despite her face gaining a pink hue. "Like the time I caught you trying to sneak." Hagakure yelled, "Shut up! Shut up! Shut up! Shut up!" and leapt at the punk rock girl to cover her mouth. Setsuna deadpanned at her argumentative sister class, saying, "I feel like a woman dying of thirst watching another woman complaining of drowning." "Same." Yui concurred, her expression remaining unchanged. Nomori turned to the teacher of Class B and said, "I've been meaning to ask, why do you all show up late?" "Huh?" Khan grunted in confusion as he looked at the female teacher. "I told you we were running late because Monoma had to wait to borrow Tokage's quirk again after he lost his." "Not that," Kayama said, shaking her head and raising her hand. "I mean here, like you said you were right outside the door when the explosion happened, so why did it take so long for you to arrive?" she asked. "Well, the answer to that is simply," Nezu announced, earning curious looks from his employees, "it's how far from the epicenter of the explosion they were." Cementos scowled at his superior and said, "What do you mean?" "Well, assuming whatever force pulled us here acted like a wave, spreading out from the center, it would take time for that wave to reach them." The teacher clarified, closing his eyes as he raised one of his fingers. "The time it took for them to arrive was simply the time between the wave hitting us and them, multiplied by the time dilation of this space." Aizawa opened one eye to gaze at his boss and asked, "But, if there is this wave pulling people into here, does that mean more people will show up?" "It would depend on how far that wave can reach before dissipating," the mammal clarified. shaking his head slightly as he closed his eyes. Also, depending on their distance, they may not arrive before the Watcher sends us back. Kirishima enthusiastically told the 1B boys, and then he shot these cables and rode this giant piece of ruble down into the drop so he could cut the guys escaping off. It was so manly, Kirishima said. It's a little hard to picture, Tetsu said clumsily, scratching his cheek while looking around his class. I guess. Agreed. This all seems kind of absurd. Jiroda frowned at the other class and nodded in agreement. I think this is made up, Monoma declared, scowling behind his class with his arms crossed. Yosetsu shot his blonde classmate a doubtful glance before responding. I mean, it does sound unbelievable, but how else do you explain where we are? I think 1A is just making this up to make themselves the center of attention, Nato argued back, turning a harsh glare towards the confused boys of Class 1A. Juzo attempted to reason with the copy user, saying, Dude, the teachers explained what this place is too. How would they even make this up? Refusing to see reason, Monoma went on, well, maybe not entirely, but I bet this can show other worlds and they are simply choosing to view only their friend. How does this even work? Nirengeki tried to change the subject, looking at his sister class. Do you just say, play universe, or something? Realm display function activated. Universe KYMT15646IMVA is ready. Everyone's attention was drawn to the screen that said, visual loading. Audio loading. Shota protested at the screen, saying, well, I'll be damned. All eyes turned to Nato as he pointed to the screen and exclaimed, aha! I bet it'll be someone from our glorious class we can watch. Dude, like we said, it's the room because Midoriya was the one in the machine. Zero rubbed the back of his neck and laughed nervously. We have no control over this. More importantly, Kaminari began, turning his own glare to the stout boy from Class 1B. It was my turn, damn it. Aizawa motioned for everyone to move their chairs forward and said, everyone settle down. It doesn't matter who started it, let's just take our seats and watch. This will make understanding things a bit easier for Class B and Shinso. Oh, what world do you think we'll get to see? Exclaimed Hado as he floated with Mirio and Tamaki, the prior holding Kota and Eri. Do you think it will be another fight? Do you think he'll win? What if he's a villain? Can Deku be a villain? I can't imagine anyone with that hair that fluffy being a villain, can you? Let's just see what it shows us, Mirio said, trying to ignore the cringe that swept through the group that had been there the longest and move on with a strained smile. Wah! A boy wearing a pig mask screamed as he fell from the sky onto a mound of flesh and overturned train carriage, grunting as he bounced off the meat before landing on his feet, holding two swords out to his side. Gah! Kamakiri, flinching at the red pile, asked in disgust, what the hell is that stuff? Is it meat? Rikido winced at the repulsive face. Mineta covered his mouth and gagged, his face turning green. That is so gross, he said. I think I'm going to puke. Denki covered his mouth and said, same. Is that Midoriya? Abara asked, trying her best not to focus on the mounds of flesh. Don't seem like it. Pony frowned at the screen and shook her head. I thought these were supposed to be centered around him. Tokage pouted and crossed her arms, disappointed. Where is he? Monoma started smugly, maybe, but was abruptly interrupted. With a comforting smile, Yaoyorozu replied, he doesn't always show up at the start. I'm sure he will show up shortly. The pig-headed boy yelled, Soda? As he ran over to a fallen figure while the screen displayed train wreckage. Are you all right? He asked. Iida rubbed his chin and said, it seems like there was a train crash. Is that flesh somehow responsible? Who cares? Bakugo shot back, laughing uncontrollably. More importantly, what kind of stupid name is Soda? He asked. Should I be offended? Sato asked, turning to Shoji who could only shrug in response. The dual wielder gently lifted an older version of a well-known boy wearing a black and green checkered haori off the ground and said, pull yourself together. Did you see me bounce off that demon's flesh just now? Kota! The crowd exclaimed, turning to face the startled boy with wide eyes. It's me, you grow up to be so cute, Mandalay teased, embracing the boy who was now flushed. With her eyes darting between the boy and the screen, Ryuko questioned, what's Kota doing there? I thought these were about Midoriya? Monoma triumphantly pointed to his sister class and exclaimed, see, I told you, Class 1A was just making it about themselves. Ow. Ha! Tokage exclaimed, laughing as his disembodied hand slashed the copy user's neck, interrupting his tirade. I always wanted to do that. The perverse boy glared at the girl with green hair and rubbed the back of his neck, yelling, "Tokage! What the hell?" Setsuna sighed in disappointment and dropped her head, saying, "Ah, it didn't work. Itsu, tag in." WYK. Nato exclaimed as an orange blur materialized behind him, causing him to panic and wave his hands in defeat. Kendo commanded, "Enough you," as she sliced the boy's neck, rendering him unconscious. "Wait, did he say, demon's flesh?" Reiko interjected quietly, looking at the screen with interest. "Eep." Abara squeaked, pulling out a cross as she began to say a prayer. "You got stabbed, right? How's your stomach?" the shirtless boy corrected, giving Kota a slight shake. "Wait, what am I saying?" he asked. "Stabbed?" the group shouted again, but none louder than Shino as she squeezed the boy tighter. The clamor of shouting, was it before or after the train crash, drowned out Kaminari's terrified cry, "He got stabbed?" Tenya asked, getting up from his chair as he chopped his arm. "Why is he shaking him? You shouldn't shake someone if they got stabbed." The wounded boy weakly gasped, I'm all right. What about you?" he asked. The masked boy proudly puffed out his chest and exclaimed, "I've never felt better, not a scratch on me." Reluctantly, Hiryu remarked, "It is kind of impressive that he didn't even get a scratch after a train crash." "True, but," Sen agreed, closing his eyes before yelling with righteous fury, "Why is he still shaking him?" Kota choked out weakly, pain evident in his voice, "That engineer, is he alright? I don't think I can move now. Can you go help the others, see if anyone's hurt?" After a brief period of silence, the boar yelled angrily, "Let him die for all I care." "We can't," Kota argued weakly, looking up at the other boy. "Did you somehow forget he's the one who stabbed you in the first place?" the unharmed boy asked in bewilderment as the screen showed a man pinned under one of the carriages struggling to pull himself free. "But if you really want to know, his legs shattered, and he can't walk anymore. Just let him rot." "So, it was an adult that stabbed him," Tiger said darkly, glaring at the man on the screen. In an attempt to soothe her friends, Ragdoll added, "At least it seems like he got what he deserved." "Not enough if you ask me," Sosaki muttered to herself. "Okay. But can we talk about how Kota cares is focusing so much on helping other?" Uraraka asked, turning a bright smile to the blushing boy. "That's so cute, it's just like something Deku would say." "Are really?" the young child squealed, his face flushing even more. The boy in green struggled to say, "Help him, Inosuke. Then he's already suffered enough, don't you think?" he asked. The shirtless boy snarled, ignoring his companion. When he didn't hear back, Kota said, almost pleadingly, "For me. You are my underling, it's the least I can do as a leader," Inosuke yelled, setting the wounded young man down before getting up and pointing a finger at him. "Fine, but only because you asked." "Wow, now you're really starting to sound like Green," Jiro chuckled, turning a smirk to the boy who hid his face in his aunt's side. Bakugo mockingly sneered, "A second Deku. Great, just what we need." As Mina imagined her class enjoying a second cinnamon roll, she exclaimed with excitement, "That sounds good to me." Toru bounced in her seat and exclaimed, "Me too," in agreement with her friend. As he approached the train, the boy with the boar's head yelled, "And after I've rescued him," and pumped his fists in the air, "I'm gonna pluck out all of his hairs." Kota sighed and closed his eyes, not bothering to watch his friend go. "You really don't have to do that last part," he said. Mandalay nodded to the aggressive boy and said, "I'm fine with that." With a thoughtful glance at Iida and Uraraka, Todoroki remarked, "He seems to pretty anger all the time. Do you think that might be an alternate version of Bakugo?" With explosions dripping from his hands, Katsuki roared, "The hell you say, icy hot?" and glared at Shota. "Why the hell would any version of me be wearing a pig head?" he asked. Kyoka leaned slowly in her chair and teased, "Why not, it seems pretty fitting." Ochako added, laughing behind her hand, "Not to mention it would be an improvement." "The foo!" Bakugo started to shout at the girls, but Tsuyu's tongue smack interrupted him. Pretending not to notice Kosei blushing as she stared at her, Asui recalled her tongue and silenced the boy, saying, "There are still children here. It's almost dawn, take control of your breathing, focus your thoughts, to save the injured on this train." Kota was thinking to himself as he gazed at the pitch night sky. "Think of Nezuko, Zenitsu, Mr. Midoriya. I'm sure the three of them are safe, you just have to believe." With a nearly predatory smile, Tokage concluded, "So, Parsley is there." Kendo asked Monoma, who had woken up just in time to hear Izuku's name, "What do you say?" The orange-haired girl let out a disappointed sigh as Nato turned away from the screen and complained defiantly, crossing his arms. Confused, Toru questioned, "But who are those other people?" Mina shrugged and said to her friend, "Don't know, maybe we'll find out?" As a heap of flesh and eyes emerged from the wreckage, one eye displaying, lower one, it thought to itself, "I can't regenerate, have I lost? Am I going to die? Me? Ridiculous. Absurd, there was so much more to do?" Bakugo and Kamakiri shouted together in disgust, "What the fuck is that?" Nomori winced at the sight of the amorphous blob of flesh and asked, "Is that a demon?" Abara gave the creature a fierce glare and sneered, "Foul heathen," before muttering into a prayer. The monstrosity's voice was filled with sorrow and agony as it uttered, "After all the preparations I had taken, I couldn't devour a single human, my plan to fuse with the train and eat everyone was a complete failure. And now look at what I've been reduced to." Mineta shrank into his seat and squeaked in terror, "It's sad it couldn't eat anyone." Vlad King scowled at the screen and glanced sideways at his students, asking, "So, in this world, demons eat humans?" Cementos rubbed his chin and tilted his head slightly, asking, "And apparently this one fused with that train?" Snipe turned to the other teachers and said, "I wonder, did it cause the train crash when it was defeated, or was it defeated because of the train crash?" They simply shrugged. Shino snarled and tightened his embrace, causing the blushing child to squeak, "Okay, but that still doesn't explain why that man stabbed Koda. He better have a damn good reason." The demon's voice snarled with rage as the screen displayed Izuku, clad in a white haori with flame patterns, swinging a sword amid flames. It was him. This was his fault. Even with all the human hostages I had in my possession, I still wasn't able to get the upper hand. Is this the power of a Hashira? Tsunotori jumped in her seat and yelled, "Ooh," and pointed to the screen. "It bunny boy." Admiring the image on the screen, Abara remarked, "He looks slightly older than he is now." Yaoyorozu muttered thoughtfully, "It appears Midoriya once again has some kind of firepower." Kendo turned to the girl with black hair and asked, "Is that common?" Momo smiled at her orange-haired friend and replied, "This is only the second time, but it is the first time we've seen it cross over in terms of abilities. Just like this is the first time we've seen anyone we recognize other than Midoriya." When Tagaru saw the bladed weapon, he smirked, barely controlled, and said, "And he has a sword." Ashido turned to the Yaoyorozu dictionary and said, "What the hell is a Hashira?" The creation user gave in and lowered her head in disappointment, saying, "I don't know." The monster moaned as the screen displayed a new character, a young blonde man about the same age as Koda and Inosuke on screen, wearing a bright yellow haori and swinging his own sword while surrounded by pale lightning. That sun-colored boy was fast, too, while still under the effects of my spell. "Who is that?" Yosetsu scowled at the screen and asked. As he adjusted his glasses, Jiroda responded to his classmate, "I believe that is the Zenitsu that Koda mentioned." As Siro observed the unknown boy on the screen, he remarked, "It looks like he has some kind of lightning powers. He seems like a really cool guy." Denki grinned broadly and cheered, feeling a sense of kinship with the unidentified boy. "Maybe," Aoyama added, posing, "but he does not sparkle as much as moi." Then there's her, a demon battling alongside the demon slayers. What is this betrayal? For what reason does Master Muzan let her survive? The creature scoffed as a young girl with veins and pupil slits appeared on the screen, surrounded by pink fire. Is she also a demon? Uncertain of how to feel about the girl, Shiozaki stumbled. Komori gave the girl a comforting smile and said, "I guess, but it seems like she's helping Koda and them, Shroom. Why does she not resemble that other demon?" Tetsu turned to his class and inquired. "Perhaps his appearance is a result of his impending death," Juzo shrugged and offered. Mineta started to say, speaking of her looks, but was abruptly interrupted. Without even glancing at the boy, Asui commanded, "No." With a defiant sigh, Minoru said, "I was going to ask if she looked like Koda. But, yeah, she is pretty hot ow." He then grinned to himself. Iida muttered, ignoring Suyu's slap at the purple boy, "She does look like him. Maybe they're siblings?" "So why isn't Koda a demon?" Sen asked, looking to Class 1A as though seeking an answer. "And who is the Muzan that was mentioned? Why does he get to decide if she lives or dies?" Nirengeki asked, turning to face his sister class. "Yes, what is their king?" Tetsu turned back to the other class and shouted, "What? How are we supposed to know? Just watch, we haven't seen this shit either," Bakugo growled, glaring at the other class. Oh no, when that little brat managed to wriggle out of my spell, Everything went to hell. This is all his fault. I would kill him now if I had the strength. And that beastly boar child. I should have killed him when I had the chance, too. The demon roared in its mind, the pile of flesh forming an arm as it reached for the wounded Kota, its body gradually turning to ash. However, I was never able to look him in the eye and put him back to sleep. His intuition was too powerful. You don't bother him, Mandalay snarled and glared hatefully at the screen. Spell. So, do demons have magic? Toru asked, turning her shoulders to face her class. Perhaps. That explains the pink fire around Nezuko, Rikido said, shrugging and scratching his cheek. However, what about Midori and that Zenitsu? Mina asked, having trouble recalling the name of the blonde boy. Perhaps everyone possesses magic. Reiko, who found this world strangely fascinating, quietly proposed. After receiving puzzled looks from everyone, Nezu retorted, maybe, or maybe they are using something different. He then went on to explain. The demon seemed surprised Kota managed to get out, and if Kota and they had magic it should be that surprising, so they may use something else. Am I really lost? Is this the end? What a terrible wretched nightmare this is. The creature asked desperately as its flesh began to deteriorate to the point where its eye fell off and rolled on the ground. Am I no different from those other lesser demons who were killed off? More demons? Frowning at the rotting creature, Kirishima questioned, is there something unique about this demon? Is it important? Bakugo rolled his eyes and yawned, saying, it's dying. Tagaru laughed and grinned smugly at the explosive boy, saying, I can't believe I'm agreeing with Dynamite Brains. What the devil do you say, Bugface? With a roar, Katsuki directed his ire at the razor-sharp user. Aizawa glared at the two boys and said, enough, both of you. For hundreds of years, our kind's upper ranks have remained unchanged. They have even killed a large number of Hashira. Do they possess any other powers? Even after receiving so much of his blood, I couldn't compete with them, the blob of flesh thought bitterly as the screen changed from showing a group of 6 shadowy figures to showing a person with dark black hair reaching towards the screen with an air of menacing energy. Even though I am one of the 12 Kazuki myself. The upper ranks. As the screen displayed the silhouettes of 6 demons, Yayorozu choked out and the room fell silent. Asui croaked, it's like I can feel how dangerous they are, her throat drying out as she questioned how something so dangerous could be depicted on screen. You can feel the killer intent radiating off of him, Iida whispered, his voice echoing throughout the room as his thoughts returned to the moment he first met Stain and was hiding for All for One. As the final remnants turned to dust and blew away in the wind, the demon thought one final time, it's not fair, if only I could turn back time, then I could undo this awful, horrible nightmare. Is that all? Aizawa asked out loud, drawing the room's attention. What are you saying? Raising an eyebrow at the other homeroom teacher, Khan posed the question. Normally when we watch a world, it's either just before or in the middle of a major event. Shoto responded while staring at the screen. But this appears to be after the event, if the demon fading away is anything to go by. Sensei, is that a bad thing? Kendo asked, glancing at the other instructor. Eraserhead responded to the student, not necessarily, but if the past is anything to go by, either something happened, and we haven't been shown it yet or, before squinting at the screen, something else is going to happen. Izuku looked down at Kota and said, you've mastered total concentration, constant. His happy face appeared on the screen. That's quite impressive. Mr. Midoriya. The wounded boy saw the man above him and gasped. With an unwavering smile, Midoriya told the boy, you're one step closer to being a Hashira. That's one step out of 10,000, mind you. I'll try my hardest, with a feeble but determined voice, the downed child declared. And there he is. When Setsuna saw the boy, she practically purred and smiled. Kept us waiting, Parsley. I assume that Hashira is the Demon Slayer's leader. Iida muttered as she turned to face Uraraka to get her viewpoint. The Gravity Girl frowned and shrugged, probably, before grinning broadly. I suppose that means Deku must be pretty strong. Recalling Ibara's earlier remark, Kendo noted, he does look older. With a tiny smile on her face, Yanagi muttered, at least we know he wasn't hurt. Tomoko gave Sosaki a comforting smile and replied, yeah, maybe he'll be able to get Kota some medical attention. Your stomach is bleeding. Take complete control of your breathing and regulate it. The green-haired man put his hands on his hips and said, can you see it? Imagine your nerves reaching through your body. The blood vessel was torn. Kota gasped and examined his stomach while attempting to do as the Hashira had instructed. Pay closer attention. Izuku gave an order while keeping his gaze fixed on the wound. What will that accomplish? Apply pressure to the wound, or better yet, get him some bandages or something, Shino said with a frown and a worried tone. Tiger nodded to his teammate and said, I hate to say this, but I agree. Kota is seriously hurt. I don't see how his picturing the injury will help. Perhaps it's something related to mental training? As the audience gave him doubtful glances, Kaminari proposed, like teaching him to ignore the pain? That's it, Midoriya announced as the screen showed a tangle web of blood vessels, one damaged before Kota homed in on it and sent a pulse throughout his body. Now stop the bleeding. Oh no. The boy clenched his teeth and grunted while concentrating on the wound. How in the world is he going to halt the bleeding? Bakugo snarled and gave the screen a frustrated glare. With a frown on his face, Yaoyorozu begged, at least get him some gauze or something. Todoroki tried to play devil's advocate by whispering, at least he's not shaking him. The others gave him a quick glare. The man with green hair put a single finger on the boy's head and said, focus. He was observing the blood still flowing from the wound. Oh. With the sudden stop of the bleeding, Kota gasped. Excellent. As he knelt over the boy and took his finger off his still injured head, Izuku congratulated him, saying, you succeeded. Mastering your breathing will open many doors for you. We have some control over the way our bodies act thanks to our breathing techniques. Although it won't fix everything right now, it will be beneficial. You'll keep getting stronger. The boy on the ground looked at the man in amazement and awe and said, thank you. Did he really close it? Shishida gasped and stared in shock as the boy's bleeding stopped. Like that? Awase muttered in disbelief. So, wait, do they battle demons with their breathing? Siro asked, as his class found it easier to adapt. Tokiyami crossed his arms in front of his chest and said, perhaps they don't have magic. How about that fire, though? Nobody had a response when Toru asked. What about the others? The recently healed child was startled when Midoriya abruptly yelled, there are many who are injured, but they are safe for the time being. So, don't strain yourself. Be sure to get some rest. I'm grateful. Kota smiled and relaxed, whispering, I will. As the screen showed the train wreckage, Deku grinned at the boy and said, good. Aizawa sighed and shook his head, looking at the students. I shouldn't have to say this, but never startle a person with a stab wound, even if it has stopped bleeding. So, was this significant occasion simply him and Kota growing closer? Mina turned to face Hagakure and asked. Perhaps, the invisible girl, who didn't know the answer herself, shrugged her shoulder. Kaminari grinned and eased himself in his chair, saying, well, at least we finally got a nice, peaceful event. A loud explosion shook the ground and diverted Izuku's attention from Kota. The green-haired man gasped and turned to see a cloud of dust and two glowing eyes peering at him through the smoke. As the cloud dissipated, Midoriya turned around with his sword in hand and saw a pale man with thick black lines tattooed across his body in a pink vest. The two men stared down at each other while the injured boy strained his neck to look at the newcomer, his eyes widening in terror at the sight of the enigmatic man's eyes. Kota thought in terror and bewilderment, those eyes, he's upper 3, what's he doing here? Denki sighed and lowered his head in surrender, saying, I need to stop saying things. The upper 3. Asui's eyes widened in shock as she gasped. Fearing for their friend's safety, Yaoyorozu stammered, I guess we'll get to see if they're as dangerous as they were made out to be. But Deku is a Hashira, correct? Ochako attempted to reassure her friends and herself, saying, maybe he's strong enough to beat that guy? Maybe, but, Iida retorted, closing his eyes and silently wishing for the best. That other demon did say, even Hashira with high body counts have fallen by their hands. Before Kota could even realize that the upper-ranked demon had moved, the tattooed monster was punching the injured boy in the head. The new demon narrowed his eyes as his vision focused on the prone boy, and the upper-ranked demon vanished, blowing the ground apart in a flash. Kota. The child stared at his counterpart in fear and concern as Mandalay screamed and squeezed him. He didn't even say a word, Hiryu exclaimed, the obvious bloodlust shocking him. Uncertain of how to react to the assault, Hononuki muttered, he just went straight for the kill. That really isn't manly. Kirishima jumped out of his chair and clenched his fist, declaring. Yes. The red-haired boy's actions were mirrored by the steel copy. He can't even defend himself, not cool, man. Breathing in flames. The second form, Izuku thought as he drew his blade, stepping between Kota and the attack as he bisected the demon's arm, the cut followed by a trail of fire, rising scorching sun. Go. Deku. Uraraka cheered, pleased to see her friend keep the boy safe. Hee. Take that, you cheap-shotting son of bit. Bakugo growled and snarled at the screen. With a sigh and a smirk concealed by his scarf, Aizawa interrupted his student, saying, there are still children here. Flame breathing. So, they use certain breathing types to enhance their bodies, and he uses one based around fire? Kendo inquired, recognizing the attack's name. Reiko said softly, gazing intently at the screen, seems like it. What was I worried about, man? There's no way this guy can beat Midoriya with a wound like that, Kaminari said, laughing in relief as he fell backward and deeper into his seat. In order to get some distance, the tattooed demon jumped backwards, giving up his attack. The upper rank halted after a few leaps, smiling and holding up his arm as the limb fell back down with a sickening sound. Then, in a split second, the demon flexed its arm, the injured appendage snapping back together and healing instantly. Upper 3 turned to lick the blood from his arm, the last of his previous wounds, and complimented him, saying, that's a fine sword. What were you saying? Jiro gave the electric boy a slight glare as he asked. Denki sighed in defeat and crossed his arms in a pout, saying, yeah, okay. I'll go back to shutting up now. That looks so gross, Setsuna spit out in disgust, obliquely observing that Yanagi appeared strangely enthralled with the exhibit. Regeneration at a high speed? Nomori muttered in surprise, like a Nomu? Toshiro bit the inside of his cheek and sighed, saying, it's way faster than any Nomu I've even heard of. Yuara thought out loud, there must be some weakness for regenerating at that rate. Tsuchikawa sighed, not wanting to see either boy suffer. Let's hope so. As he examined the demon, Midoriya thought to himself, his speed of regeneration and sheer malice behind his attack. So, this is an upper rank. Why would you prioritize a wounded person over me? With his red and black blade ready to strike, Deku questioned the creature. The man with the tattoos replied casually, I thought he'd get in the way of our little chit-chat is all. Katsuki practically moaned and rolled his eyes, saying, of course, the nerd would be thinking like that. Considering how to win, Momo analyzed, so, demons don't normally heal that fast. Kyoka snarled in shock, he was just going to kill Kota because he wants to talk privately. Sheepishly, Mina gasped, that seems a little extreme. Sato wrote, I never thought a demon would want to talk about anything, but was largely ignored. What would you like to talk about? While this is our first time meeting, I already dislike you, the man with green hair asked, his voice resonating across the field. Is that correct? The demon laughed and continued to smile at the Hashira, saying, well, I don't like weak people. The sight of them makes my skin crawl. Izuku said, his eyes hardening even further, if that is the case, I do not believe we will ever get along. Sosaki complained while softly massaging Kota's back, can't say I like him either. Shiozaki nodded and gave the man with the tattoos a venomous look, agreed. What could he possibly want to discuss? Kendo frowned, troubled by the tattooed man's remarks. At least this Midoriya is nicer than the last one, Honda sighed, attempting to find hope. What? What do you mean, nicer than the last one? Hato asked, glancing at the tape user in bewilderment. What does he mean by, nicer than the last one, Mirio? Was there anything that occurred in the previous world? Don't worry about it. Mirio laughed uneasily as the black-haired boy shrank back in his chair as the Zero's class glared at him. In contrast to the tension in Midoriya, the tattooed man said nonchalantly, be that as it may, let me make you an offer, why don't you also turn into a demon? Become a demon? Abara let out a gasp as she felt her face lose color. Were demons once human? Iida stared at the screen and muttered in disbelief. But they consume humans. Mina cried out in horror at what they had just discovered. Awase's face turned green as he grunted, that is so messed up. Deku won't agree, will he? Eri asked, her eyes wide as she gazed at Mirio. Aha! I now understand the purpose of this world. Someone from Class 1A will undoubtedly accept and selfishly become a. Nato smirked triumphantly at the screen as he started, but what followed interrupted him. Midoriya declined without even considering the offer, saying, no, thanks. I can tell you're strong just by looking at you. Hashira? Your fighting spirit has been tempered like quality steel, the demon said, almost taunting the Hashira while the screen showed the world through its eyes. What's your name? Monoma crossed his arms in a pout and sighed, okay, I might have been wrong. What else is novel? Itsuka grinned at the vanquished boy and laughed. Shota exhaled a sigh of relief, he didn't to think about it. Abara grinned to herself and said smugly, good. Yaomomo bit her lip nervously, but with a tiny sigh of relief, she muttered, so, Hashira are strong, if this demon recognizing he's one based off of his strength alone. Todoroki narrowed his eyes at the screen and was almost growling, I don't like this, if he knows Midoriya is strong, then why is he so relaxed? With his guard still up, the green-haired man replied, I'm the Flame Hashira, Izuku Midoriya. My name is Akaza. In a mockingly casual manner, the newly named demon chose to tell the Hashira, Izuku. Let me tell you why, despite being a Hashira, your strength is not enough, because you're merely human, destined to grow old and eventually die. Turn into a demon, Izuku. You could continue to improve yourself for another 100 or even 200 years if you did this. I suppose demons never grow old? Silent until now, but seeking clarification, Shinso inquired. Juzo shrugged, unsure of himself. Sounds like it. If they don't age and they have remained the same for hundreds of years, Jiroda murmured as he stroked his. Then he probably has an immense amount of combat experience. With his eyes narrowed, Shota sighed and said, that would explain why he's so relaxed. For once, Mineta looked ashamed of himself and said, I'm not going to lie. This does sound like a tempting offer. Dude. Kaminari gasped, smacking the short boy as the room glared at him. They eat people. I'm not saying that I would accept it. Holding up his hands in defeat, Minoru defended himself, saying, but being damn near immortal? It must be difficult to resist. He smells the most like Muzan Kibutsuji of all the demons I've encountered so far. Rotating so that he was on his hands and knees, Kota thought. I must assist in the battle against him. No, you don't. The boy she was holding flinched as Shino screamed, you were stabbed, you need to be as far away from a fight as possible. Agreed. With a somber nod, Shitora said, with an injury like that, he'd more likely get in the way. Smells? Only the Class B girls in the vicinity could hear Kodai's whisper. Abara scrunched her nose in disgust and gagged, saying, I don't even want to know what a demon smells like. Being old and dying are two things that make being human beautiful. Although they may seem like flaws to you, they make our lives even more valuable and honorable. This boy is not weak, Midoriya said, pointing to a screen that showed various people rescuing others from the train wreckage. You see, true strength does not just refer to the physical body. Don't make fun of him. Kota muttered, Midoriya, as he heard the Hashira's words, his eyes welling with tears. The child recognized the heroic boy's voice as that of a brother. Yagi proudly puffed out his chest and said, well said, however, he ended up coughing up blood. Nezu sat quietly at the screen and complimented, indeed, he seems to have wisdom beyond his years. I want to be clear. No matter what twisted reasons you give, I will not yield, Deku said, his eyes hardening as he gazed down at the demon. The two of us will never see eye to eye. I see. Akaza sighed, his casual air vanishing as he dangerously narrowed his eyes. Shoji murmured, I guess he didn't like that answer. Hagakure muttered, trembling, I don't like how he said that. Jiro glared at the short, purple-haired boy and reprimanded, at least he sticks to his morals. As he squatted with his fist by his side and his palm facing outward, the tattooed demon declared, technique development. He flexed his fingers before slamming his foot into the ground, shattering the earth as a snowflake pattern emerged, glowing with ethereal energy as it changed from red to blue. Destructive death, compass needle. PFF'd. Mina fought back a chuckle and asked, what is a snowflake? Yaoyorozu scowled at the screen and said, I wouldn't laugh. Remember what happened last time we laughed at funny that looked silly? Does this demon possess any ice-related abilities? Todoroki asked, clenching his right side without realizing it. Watching the screen intently, Kendo said, I don't think so. Look at his stance, it looks like some kind of martial arts pose. With a calculating gaze on the screen, Ojiro concurred, yeah, and it's pretty impressive, too. It's ironclad, I don't see a single opening. Akaza said, I guess I'll just have to kill you then. Both fighters were tense in their respective fighting stances as the screen displayed the energy radiating through the pattern on the ground. Izuku ducked under the punch and swiped at the tattooed man, but the demon jumped back, avoiding the slash before charging back in. Without another word, Hashira and the demon charged at each other, blade meeting fist, as Akaza and Midoriya leaned forward, faces inches apart, one grinning, the other glaring. At last, some action. With a wild smile on his face, Togaru yelled. Deku, you had better not lose, Katsuki snarled, but there was also a smile on his face. With a thunderous explosion, the two split apart, and Koda watched in awe as dust flew in and red and blue streaks danced across the field, the sound of lightning fast blows reverberating through the air as only the light of their attacks could be seen. I am unable to monitor either of them. With his mouth hanging open in disbelief, the wounded boy thought to himself. So quick! The newcomers shouted, but the dancing lights startled everyone. Go so quickly! Unable to form a complete sentence, Pony yelled. Seems like Koda is far below that level, Iida said. I guess Hashira are strong. He only needs to breathe in a specific way to move that quickly. Incredulous, Rin asked. Geez, Kirishima sighed, then grinned broadly. That is, so manly. I've never had the opportunity to kill a flame Hashira in my entire life. As the demon's blows were blocked by the swordsman with a shower of sparks, Akaza said to Midoriya, no one has yet to take me up on my offer, either. Why do you suppose that is? As a fellow martial arts master, I just can't understand it, Upper 3 said, sounding almost dissatisfied as Izuku sliced down on his arm, only severing it halfway through. Not when only those who are selected can turn into demons. As she watched the display in amazement, Honda muttered, they're attacking so fast, I can barely keep track of them. Yaomomo tilted her head to the side and thought out loud, so, this is the first time this Akaza has fought a flame Hashira. Is that a positive thing? Hagakure asked the wealthy girl. Momo reassured the invisible girl, ignoring the doubt that was nagging at the back of her mind. Yes, it means he doesn't have the advantage of already knowing Midoriya's moves. Maybe he isn't entirely outmatched, Shishida said, gently rubbing his chin. It seems Midoriya is keeping pace. The tattooed demon swung his arm, intending to chop the Hashira, but Izuku turned his blade, slashing upwards and cutting off the monster's arm just above the elbow. As the severed appendage flew into the air, Deku attempted to cut the demon's midriff, but Akaza ducked the blow with a tiny leap back. The upper-ranked demon quickly grew the lost limb and used it to punch the green-haired man's head again, but the flame Hashira blocked the blow in the same instant. Are you able to grow back so quickly? Startled by the demon's powers and attempting to obtain a benchmark, Itsuka questioned Tokage. Are you serious? Setsuna denied, practically giggling at the thought. We wouldn't have been late waiting for Monoma to grow his hair back if I could heal that quickly. It was an accident, I said. Can we please stop bringing it up? Nato interrupted, his face burning red. It hurts me more than you can imagine to see the terrible decline of someone who was given your abilities. As Izuku moaned and struggled to block the blow, Akaza threw his other fist forward and said, while you're still young and strong, your life should be cut short. It is your life that ought to be terminated. As students in the vicinity were forced to flee, Shiozaki let out a venomous roar, her quirk lash out wildly. Whoa, Iba, you may want to take it down a notch. Setsuna used her quirk to avoid the whipping vines in an attempt to soothe the girl. It's just to hear that disgusting thing threaten Midoriya is a bit vexing. Abara sighed, taking a deep breath and calming down as her quirk went back to being submissive. You're doing fine, girl. I think we're all in the same boat, Mina said, laughing and rubbing the back of her head anxiously. Oh, Ra! Akaza leapt backward and into the air as Midoriya roared, pushing back and slashing at the demon. The demon declared, destructive death. As he crouched and hung in midair, he then clenched his fist and pulled back for a punch, his hand glowing with blue power. Air-type. What does air-type mean to him? Sen turned to Yosetsu and asked. With a puffy chest and an attempt to sound intelligent, Awase replied, I don't know, maybe he does have an ice power and will drop the temperature of the air. Deku remained silent, his eyes darting as the demon struck the air, only to gasp in pain and shock when a blow struck his chest. Gah. The weld user sighed mournfully and lowered his head in dismay, saying, or maybe not. A wave of concussions? Shota, a little impressed, gasped. Tokiyami closed his eyes and muttered, so, he can attack at a distance too. Truly a mad banquet of darkness. Shitai closed his eyes to match the other boys and nodded in agreement, saying, the creeping darkness grows. What on earth are you two discussing? Everyone looked at the two in confusion as Bakugo yelled, and for once, they agreed with the irate boy. Hee. Akaza growled and delivered two more blows, but Hashira was able to block them this time, causing the green-haired man to slip backward. In that case, Deku thought to himself, gritting his teeth to stifle the agony. Gaha. The demon let out a roar and continued to punch the air, launching a torrent of assaults. The technique of flame breathing. Blooming flame undulation, fourth form. Izuku declared as he repositioned his grip and swung his sword through the air, blocking the volley of air blasts with a wall of flames behind him. A tactic for defense? Puzzled by the strangely specific move, Hiryu asked. Mashirao softly shook his head and muttered, "No, I don't think so." "What are you saying?" With a tentacled gaze on the tail user, Shoji inquired. With her eyes fixed on the screen, Itsuka concurred with the other martial artist. "I think he's right. Look at the way he swung his sword. It looks more like an attack meant to cover a large area, and Midoriya just repurposed it to block instead." The ferocious boy from Class 1B muttered, startled, "That's very impressive." With his faces flashing blue in the orange light of the fire, Midoriya thought to himself, if he strikes the air, the attack will still reach me, as the demon's attacks struck the flames. Oh! As the Hashira waved his sword again, reviving the wall of flames, the tattooed man snarled and launched another barrage. As he watched the attack clash with his defense, the green-haired man analyzed, the strikes travel instantly. "Of course, the nerd overthinks in this world too," Katsuki complained, turning his head away from the screen. "In our world, he thinks like this?" Yanagi turned to face the ashy blonde and raised an eyebrow in a quiet question. Uraraka laughed, picturing Deku muttering non-stop, "all the time." Tsuyu looked at her sister class and said, "You should see his notebooks. Those items he never leaves home without." "What's in them?" Setsuna asked, casting doubtful glances at the two. Shoto replied, maintaining his tone while he kept his eyes on the screen, "Midoriya likes to analyze people's quirks in his free time." His words caught the attention of those outside. Bakugo grunted and said, "The nerd probably knows some pros' quirks better than they do." This statement nearly sounded like a compliment, which shocked the outsiders even more. A demon can be killed by either beheading them with a Nichiren blade or by exposing them directly to sunlight. As Akaza fell to the ground, the two of them staring at each other, before the Hashira changed positions, Deku thought, "Very well. I don't have time to wait for sunrise and I can't slice his head off if I continue fighting him at a distance like this. So, chopping off its head or exposing it to the sun are the only ways to kill it?" With a perplexed expression on the screen, Ashido asked, "Like a vampire?" Yaoyorozu scowled at the screen and bit her lip, summarizing, "So, there is a weakness to a demon's regeneration. But why sunlight?" "A Nichiren blade. What is it?" "Mirio, do you know what Nichiren is?" Hato asked, prodding her cheek as she tilted her head and then turned to face her friends. "How about you, Tamaki?" "I believe it's pronounced Nichiren, Nijire." Imajiki muttered, shrinking in his seat and covering his face with his arms. "And, no, sorry. It's close combat." Izuku made up his mind, vanishing in a flurry of flames and emerging inside the demon's guard. The creature's eyes widened in disbelief at the man's unexpected appearance. "Those quick reactions." Akaza applauded, leaning back to dodge the attack with a smile, "Brilliant." "So quick." The audience yelled. He quickly closed the distance, impressed by the display of speed, Kaibara gasped. "Yes, and did you notice the expression on his face?" Pointing to the demon on screen, Honda laughed and said, "Even a upper rank didn't see that coming." Tenya watched the screen intently and grimaced, "Maybe, but he was still able to react to it." "They'll also lose those amazing sword skills." The upper rank argued as the two clashed once more, their blows creating shockwaves before the first ones had even dissipated, blood and sparks dancing through the air. "Doesn't that thought make you sad, Izuku?" "These are just facets of being human." Matching the demon blow for blow, Midoriya retorted, "Why would it?" As he observed the young man's skills, Vald King exclaimed, "It's not just his movement, even his attacks are fast." Ishiyama said, startled by the shockwaves from the blows and powerful. Kayama sighed as a horrifying thought occurred to her. Imagine if he did accept the offer. He's able to keep up with that demon even as a human. Shota muttered, impressed by the skill of his student's alternate form. Luckily he doesn't seem interested. "Remain there," Deku ordered as Inosuke ran up besides Kota, the injured boy trying to force himself to his feet, only for both boys to go rigid at the man's voice. "We can't reopen that wound of yours. You'll die from it." "I'm grateful. You should never move with an injury like that," Mandalay cried, raising her arms in the air. "It's impressive that he was able to notice the boy attempting to move, given how little it was," Toshinori said, nodding in agreement as he touched the wound that ended his career. Nezu sighed solemnly before responding to the unposed query. "He isn't just fighting him, he's fighting to protect them, meaning he can't simply focus on his opponent." "True, but that just brings attention to another problem in this fight," he said. "TCH. Kota watched the fight with concern and clicked his tongue. That weakling is nothing to worry about. Akaza reprimanded the Hashira, charging back in with a punch and blocking another slash with his wrist. Show me your strength. Oh my. The flame Hashira had hardly time to block the demon's jab before its sword passed the green-haired man, who gasped as it lunged. The tattooed man grinned and got up from his landing, saying, "Keep your eyes on me." As the group turned to face him, Kota muttered, "It's just like with Muscular. I'm just forced to stand off to the side and watch while Midoriya fights to protect me. Am I ever going to be anything other than a burden to him?" "Oh sweetie," Shino sobbed silently while rubbing the boys' backs. Todoroki turned back to the screen and remarked, "You were never a burden." "Yes, I was." The young child attempted to argue but was cut off. "One thing has been obvious ever since I met Midoriya. His goal is to assist others. He would never think of you as a burden, so you shouldn't think of yourself as one either," Tenya said softly, grinning at the boy. "Oh!" Izuku screamed as he charged the demon, swiping with a horizontal slash that the monster just leapt over. Rising from the ground, the upper rank attempted to punch the man, but was swiftly blocked and sent flying into a forest with another powerful swing. Midoriya wasted no time in pursuing the demon into the darkness as dust from the impact flew above the trees. Very powerful. Tsunotori's mouth dropped open in awe. Holy shit. He can increase his strength that much by just breathing in a certain way? Kosei exclaimed, his jaw dropping. Perhaps Midoriya has this. With confidence in his voice, Kaminari spoke up for his friend. Very good movement. When he reappeared in front of Deku, Akaza cheered with delight. Oh. The green-haired man lunged forward, cutting off the monster's extended arm as Akaza leaned away from the next slash. Before Midoriya could attack again, he had to raise his blade to block a kick from the upper rank. The force of the blocked blow was enough to send Izuku hurtling out of the forest and crashing into the mound of dirt the train tracks resided on. The flame Hashira grunted as the two clashed, ducking under the demon's punch and rounding a tree. "Midoriya!" Everyone screamed, some of them wincing at the forceful blow. "Yeah, that's my bad," Denki sighed, lowering his head once more as Jiro gave him a glare that bordered on mockery. "Midoriya!" Kota let out a terrified and worried cry. "Be careful, Freckles," Inosuke yelled, his voice clearly tinged with personal anxiety. "Aha!" Setsuna exclaimed with an excited grin. "Freckles. That's nice, I'll have to give that a try." Shiozaki sighed and shook her head, trying, but failing, to conceal the affection that permeated her voice. "You and your nicknames," she said. "Are you certain you won't become a demon?" Akaza asked as he emerged from the forest, his arm still missing, but Midoriya was still panting, leaning on his sword as the dust cleared. "Think of it this way. We could spar indefinitely if you did." Izuku took a moment to catch his breath while maintaining a fixed stare on his opponent, unable to reply. "Just think of how much more powerful we would be." With a sickening sound, the demon's arm grew back as it attempted to convince the man once more. "Never, let me clarify." Izuku snarled as he stood up and prepared his sword again, saying, "I don't like you. I won't turn into a demon." The demon's insistence troubled Yaomomo, who muttered, "He really wants to convince Midoriya to become a demon." Mineta gave him a subtle glare because she hadn't forgotten his earlier remark, and Ibara noted almost proudly, "Luckily, Midoriya at least has a good sense of honor." "For now," Nato complained, then got to his feet and pointed a finger across the room. "Believe me, he'll reveal his true nature like every member of Class 1 AC when things get desperate." As she chopped the boy in the back of his neck, Kendo sighed and said, "Down. Can you stop doing this? My hand is getting tired." The third form of flame breathing. Deku roared as he charged Akaza, leaping into the air and falling with a ferocious slash, blazing universe. What a fantastic assault! The upper rank cheered, jumping back yet still being grazed by the fiery slash before he rushed forwards, appearing under Midoriya's guard, poised to strike, destructive death, air-type. "Oh!" The Hashira grunted as he blocked the attack, the force sending him hurtling back, only for him to charge in once more with a yell, "Ah!" Blazing universe. "That sounds so cool," Ochako repeated, her eyes glistening, before turning to face the boy with the two colors. "Todoroki, you ought to do a super move like that." Shoto nodded his approval of the name and said, "I'll work on that when we get back." He then scowled at the screen and said, "Right now, I'm more concerned about why Bakugo's counterpart hasn't joined the fight. He's not my equivalent. Besides, Boarhead is probably too weak to help." Katsuki complained with an eye roll after growling and glaring at the boy in white and red. "I want to join the fight, But I can't find a chance because they're moving so quickly. As he and Koda watched the battle in wonder, Inosuke bemoaned in his mind, a chill of terror spreading through his body. These two are completely different. I would definitely be killed if I got in the way of them. Look! Bakugo barked a laugh, pointing at the screen while smirking to the son of Endeavor. What did I tell ya? He survived a train accident unharmed, but he can't keep up with them, Rikido inquired, genuinely recognizing the difference between the two. That only serves to highlight how powerful this Deku truly is. Ochako rubbed the back of her head and laughed uneasily. Yes, but, Momo said, agreeing to remind the girl, it also means he is in this fight alone, with no one to back him up. I know I would only slow him down even if I did find an opportunity. The man charged in again, slashing at the upper rank before dodging a punch, while the demon pushed the human back. The boar-headed boy sighed in his thoughts, even the voice in his head trembling. Mr. Midoriya, Koda muttered, his eyes wide with terror as the tattooed demon crashed into the ground with a roar, shattering the ground. He then charged the green-haired man, who deflected the punch before the demon deflected the next one, catching the blade with his forearm. Eijiro watched the battle with a sigh and a restless fidget. Damn, this is just like watching All Might fight back in the USJ. Back then, was it really that intense? Juzo scowled at his sister class and asked. With a tone that left no room for disagreement, Mezzo replied, yes. This battle is pointless. As the two pressed against each other, fighting for control, Akaza reprimanded, if you keep up this pointless attack, it will only lead to your death. Hee. The upper rank leapt into the air again as Izuku screamed in outraged anger and pushed the demon back. He already knows that, Yagi sighed, understanding the boy's emotions on screen. Sensei, what do you mean? After hearing the teacher, Kyoka worriedly inquired. The room shuddered in horror as Toshinori grimly responded, he knew he was outmatched before the fight began. Just based on the demon's rate of healing, he's not fighting to simply kill his opponent, but more to make sure his opponent doesn't hurt anyone. The tattooed man landed smiling again, charging the flame Hashira this time. The demon threw a flurry of punches that the human could not stop, and one of them went through, Midoriya barely leaning in time to catch it as it grazed just above his eye, causing a gash to appear as the flesh was torn. First form, unknowing fire, flame breathing, Deku snarled, whirling his body as he slashed horizontally, severing both of Akaza's arms, but in less than a second, the demon simply grew back the severed limbs. When Tetsu saw the gash, he flinched and said, damn, that's the first time he's drawn blood. Asui croaked, her voice tinged with fear, it doesn't matter if Midoriya's attack has done more damage, his opponent can simply heal it instantly, but... He cleared his front as he prepared for the worst. Any damage he takes is just going to keep adding up, Iida concluded. It would be a waste to kill you now. You haven't reached your peak yet, the tattooed man taunted as he continued to punch the human, who was having difficulty deflecting every blow. Oh! As the monster struck Izuku hard in the right side of his abdomen, causing him to stumble back, he gasped and spat up bile. That is not what comes to mind when I think of parsley and fisting, Tokage moaned, flinching at the blow. Sets. The green-haired girl laughed as the ginger class representative slapped at her, and Kendo screamed as the room burst into red blushes. That is completely unsuitable, Setsuna. Abara scowled at the girl who was floating and reprimanded her. Are you even aware of what that implies? Yanagi noticed that the religious girl's face was not flushed and asked, her cheeks flushed. Well, no. But based on her past and your response, I can only conclude that it's not good. Yui leaned to the devout girl's ear and told the young heroine the truth without saying anything. Setsuna Tokage. The floating girl gave Shiozaki another round of laughter as she screamed, her vines slashing out as her face turned atomic red. Yaomomo scowled at the other girls and muttered, I'm afraid I don't know what it means either. Jiro sighed as she heard Kodai's explanation, her face flaming red. Trust me, you don't want to, she said. Look at what I have to cope with. Khan turned to the other homeroom teacher and complained. Aizawa rolled his eyes at the student's antics and sighed sarcastically, my heart weeps for you. Second form. Midoriya stammered out, his voice weakening from the forceful blow, rising scorching sun. Your skills would become even more refined in a matter of years. Akaza told the man as he transitioned from quick blows to heavier, slower blows. Eventually, one punch went through and struck the Hashira's eyebrow, causing the bone to collapse and the flesh to peel away. Yosetsu turned green at the sight of the attack and moaned, damn, He's really starting to take damage now. The room fell silent. This is really starting to get bad, Mineta shuddered, and everyone nodded. Blazing Universe. Third form. Deku gasped as he staggered back again, then charged the demon with a downward slash. However, when the tattooed man tried to punch him again, he was forced to stop the attack and jump back. Jiroda scowled at the man's struggle and sighed, he can't even attack anymore. Blooming Flame Undulation. Fourth form. The green-haired man's wounds and blood were highlighted by the fire's glow as the flame Hashira roared and swung his blade while the demon leapt back. Deku, Uraraka exclaimed, tears welling up in her eyes. He'll be all right, right? Toru inquired, clinging to hope. Maybe the sun will rise? Perhaps, but when will it happen? Looking away from the screen, Suyu answered, not wanting to watch her friend suffer anymore. Destructive death, Akaza said, lowering himself back into a crouch. Flame Tiger. Fifth form. As he was consumed by flames, Izuku cried out as he charged forward. Order. The upper rank laughed as he finished, his energy exploding as he delivered a barrage of blows. As she watched in anticipation, Iida remarked, looks like this may be the final attack. He has to end this quickly, he can't afford to take any more damage, Todoroki said, nodding and silently wishing for the best. Deku. Hurry up. Bakugo roared, his teeth clenched painful as explosions sparkled across his hands, don't you dare lose. Numerous bursts of glowing blue energy matched the tiger's flaming form, and the flames danced as the blows bounced off, scattering the fire. As the attack subsided, the two warriors were the only ones left, continuing to charge at each other. Pony murmured, amazed by the assault, very cool. Tenya bit the inside of his cheek nervously as he thought aloud, a technique like that has to be his ultimate move. This is it. Everyone leaned in to watch the screen as Ashido yelled nervously. Attack me. Midoriya gritted his teeth as he slashed again, cutting the demon with its arm and sending blood flying into the air as the tattooed man leapt backwards and vanished into the bottle's dust. Akaza encouraged as he jabbed at Izuku once more, the Hashira ducking under the blow as the two eyes met once more. Kirishima looked expectantly at the screen and gasped, did he actually? Rin said, holy shit, in shock. He won? Denki gasped as she tried to comprehend what had just transpired. Wait. Inosuke gasped as the field fell into silence, the outline of the demon dropping to the ground. Is that it? Was he successful? As Koda watched Midoriya's blood spill onto the floor, he remained silent and his breath caught in his throat. Is it truly finished? Eri asked, casting a beseeching glance at Tagata. Mirio comforted the child by rubbing her back and confessing, I don't know. The dust cleared as the demon stood up, and the upper rank remained silent as he regrew his arm. Deku gasped as he observed his opponent, blood seeping from his mouth and his left eye crushed and bleeding. As Koda observed the tattooed man coolly scowling at the flame Hashira, the swordsman's hand trembling as he tried to hold onto his blade, he thought, no way. And no, Abara gasped as she watched the screen, her sadness showing. Momo, could you please give me some tape to cover Kaminari's mouth? Jiro glared at the lightning wielder and inquired. Fuck it. Even after all of that, he was unable to cause any long-lasting harm, Tetsu swore while glaring at the demon on the screen. Akaza sighed and cast a sorrowful glance at the injured man, saying, don't tell me it's over. I won't have you die on me. The only answer the demon received was the green-haired man's labored breathing, his blood still dripping onto the ground below, as he was exhausted from the fight. Mr. Midoriya. Midoriya. Koda panicked in his mind as he watched the Hashira struggle to stand, Midoriya. That's all you know how to say, geez. Kamakiri looked at the young boy and let out a growl of frustration. Nervously, Koda hid his face in his aunt's side and said, sorry. Mandalay assured the boy, don't apologize, you have nothing to be sorry for. Then he glared at the mantis boy. Feeling a surge of murderous intent from the irate woman, Tagaru stumbled, right, my bad. Don't you realize that my strength will always surpass yours even if you fight to the death in that weak human body? The powerful blows you delivered to me have already fully recovered. If you were a demon, you would heal in the blink of an eye, and those wounds would be but mere scratches, the tattooed man said, running a hand over his body as the last of his wounds vanished. He then pointed to Midoriya, who was barely standing as his severely injured body continued to bleed. A human can never defeat a demon in the end. Is the difference really that big? Reiko let out a sigh as she felt her last hope vanishing. Kirishima slammed his fist against his leg, growling in exasperation. This is hopeless. Did he ever have a chance to win? For a while it felt like it, Yaoyorozu moaned gravely, her eyes falling to the floor. With his hand still on his stomach, the wounded boy moaned in his head, I want to go help him. But I don't have the strength to move. This injury and using Hinokami Kagura have taken their toll. Himokage Kafura, Pony asked, perplexedly glancing at her class. Abara tried to divert her attention from the screen by forcing a smile at the non-native speaker. He said, Hinokami Kagura, sweetie, and it means, dance of the fire god. How does that relate to anything? Siro let out a frustrated cry. Perhaps it's a unique breathing method. Sato shrugged, unsure of how else to respond. The flame Hashira remained silent as he eventually managed to control his breathing. His haori blew in the air as he was once more surrounded by a fiery aura. Akaza sighed as he observed the man regaining his will to fight. So, this is how it is, then. Stunned by the green-haired man's behavior, Nato muttered, he can't be serious. His condition makes it impossible for him to fight. Pixie Bob cried out in disbelief. I'll see that my obligation is met. No matter what it takes, no one shall die here. Izuku roared, his face beaming with joy as he shifted into a fighting stance once more and positioned his blade behind his head. Is he really going to continue fighting? Tokage looked at the screen with wide eyes and asked in disbelief. That's crazy. He can barely stand, Kendo yelled, hurling her hands in the direction of the scene. Midoriya slipped into a lower stance as his face hardened in preparation, mentally planning, I'll inflict as much damage as quickly as possible. Flame breathing. Esoteric art. Haha. What an amazing fighting spirit, to press on, despite your bodily injuries. Akaza exclaimed in surprise as he saw the fiery aura flare outward, sending chills down his spine. That brilliant mental fortitude, and that ironclad position. What on earth does esoteric mean? Mina inquired bewilderedly. Momo straightened her back and explained, it means it's something only a small amount of people can understand or use. So, this is a very secret method of some sort? There was a hint of excitement in Toru's voice as she asked. Seems like it, in a less upbeat tone, Hononuki shrugged. As she anxiously watched the screen, Hirayu sighed and said, let's hope it's enough. Hee ha ha ha. With a wave of his hand, the demon shouted to the sky, now you have to turn into a demon. And laughed with delight. Imagine it. For all eternity, we could battle each other. Set your heart ablaze. Deku growled resolutely as an ember sparked in his chest and swiftly grew into a raging conflagration that engulfed his limbs and tightened his hold on his blade. Go beyond your limits. Plus ultra. The words revitalized the group as the room erupted. Brodoria, hurry up. You got this, Kirishima yelled, getting up from his chair and grinning. Prove to that demon who's in charge. Tetsu matched the other boy's enthusiasm and agreed. Izuku Midoriya. I am the flame Hashira. Izuku roared in determination, his body radiating unseen power as he glared at his enemy. Ninth form, Rengoku. Annihilation type, destructive death. As he got ready for a final fight, Akaza proclaimed, lowering himself into his own stance. This is the last battle. Astonished by the strength emanating from the fighters, Subaraba cried out. Deku, you had better not lose, Bakugo snarled, his teeth clenched so tightly that his gums nearly began to bleed. Hey! The flame Hashira shouted as he blasted forward, splintering the earth as he was consumed by flames. The green-haired man hurried forward, the twisted face of a dragon emerging from the flames. Hee! The upper rank chuckled merrily as he struck the human, causing the field to tremble and explode from the force of their collision. Midoriya. As the rising smoke engulfed the two younger demon slayers, Kota screamed in terror. The other girls could hardly hear Yui whispering, hot. Yaomomo watched the screen in awe and muttered, I mean it is a really impressive attack, but it doesn't seem to be burning anything. Kodai looked at the wealthy girl and said, not what I meant. Oh, Momo exclaimed, blushing brightly. Setsuna laughed and smiled at the screen, saying, I mean, she's not wrong. Hee. The fighters snarled as they collided, the demon splintering off to laugh as the demon slayer sliced through his right arm. Hashira raised his blade and slashed down once more, intending to sever the upper rank's head, but the tattooed man deflected the blow at the last moment, allowing the blade to cut through his abdomen. Hurrah! A twisting pillar of fire tore through the air and ground as the attack came to an end, the field covered in a thick fog of dust. Izuku roared, stepping forward as he twisted his blade. the demon's face changing to one of fear and pain as a geyser of flames erupted across the blade. The demon slayer roared again as he tore his sword upwards and threw the shocked demon. Yosetsu, unable to take his eyes off the screen, muttered, he actually wiped that smile off of that demon's face. Captivated by the dancing flames, Shishida exclaimed, what an amazing attack. Mr. Midoriya. Where is he? Koda yelled in his mind as he scanned the smoke for any sign of the Hashira. His voice relaxed as he began to make out the form of the man with his sword raised high. There. Was he the winner? Is it truly over? Tomoko muttered as she gazed at the figure in the smoke, her eyes shaking. How about Deku? Ochako pleaded, holding her hands together as if to pray, is he all right? Ah! As the smoke cleared and Izuku was seen impaled on the demon's arm, blood streaming from his mouth, the young demon slayer screamed in anguish. Oh, my goodness! Shiozaki's eyes filled with tears as she gasped and covered her mouth with her hands. And no. Toru's breath left her lungs as she wheezed. After all that, gritted Kirishima, his fists clenched in his lap. Yaoyorozu turned away from the screen and bit her lip, whispering, not again. Again? Setsuna asked, her eyes wide as she gazed at the wealthy girl. You must be aware that this wound will kill you, Izuku. Preserve yourself. Declare that you will turn into a demon. Akaza pleaded, his wounds healing as he looked at the flame Hashira in desperation. Can't you see? You are very unique because of your strength. This is it. The moment I am finally proven right, and he becomes Ak! Exclaimed Nato, triumphantly waving his hand at the screen. It's not the time, really, Itsuka snarled and used her enlarged thumb to cover up the tears in her eyes as she struck the boy once more, triggering her quirk. The words, bring back memories for Midoriya. A lovely woman with long green hair gazed serenely at the sky and trees while birds chirped and a wind chime sounded softly in the breeze. The woman turned behind her and yelled, Izuku. Yes, mother, tell me what it is. A young Izuku inquired, his body tensing up in deference. As she watched her son intently, the woman, Inko Midoriya, said solemnly, I want to ask you something, and I want you to answer honestly. Eek. When Uraraka saw the small child, she exclaimed, Baby Deku is so cute. Is that his mother? Hagakure shifted in her chair and asked. With a grunt, Kachan replied, yeah, it is. Well, she appears to be. Mineta started, but he was interrupted when he felt an iron grip encircle his throat and raise him into the air. Bakugo glared at the short boy and growled, his voice surprisingly calm, finish that sentence and I'll use your larynx as a kazoo. In an attempt to calm the bold boy, Eijiro nervously laughed, Bakubro, maybe you should calm down. With a deadly calm voice, Katsuki interrupted, Kirishima. The room stared in disbelief. Yeah? Kirishima abruptly responded, feeling even more nervous about not having a nickname. With his eyes fixed on the boy with a grape theme who was struggling under his control, the ashy blonde commanded, stop talking. Yes, sir. The boy with red hair yelled, his body stiffening as he unconsciously turned on his quirk and slammed himself into his seat. Now, Katsuki said softly, squinting at the frightened boy he was holding. What were you going to say? Minoru's body trembled with fear as he stammered, she looks like a very respectable woman. His voice was barely audible against the vice grip around his neck. Excellent. Now sit there and shut up, Bakugo yelled, hurling the shaky boy into his seat. As his friend started to relax, Kaminari muttered, I think you pushed the wrong button. Mineta rubbed his sore throat and pleaded in a raspy voice, remind me never to do that again. Do you know why you were born stronger than a lot of other people? With a glance at her son, Inko inquired. Huh? The young boy sighed in confusion, an even smaller version of him sleeping less than a foot away. No, ma'am, I don't. One more. Toru, Ochako, and Ashido all jumped with excitement in their seats as she yelled. Does he have a brother? Looking hopefully at Class 1A, Najire inquired, does our Deku have a brother? After pondering for a moment, Tenya responded, I don't believe so. The spiral-haired girl sighed in disappointment. It's to safeguard the vulnerable. The Midoriya matriarch told the boy, looking at him gravely, you must never use that God-given strength to bring harm to mankind or for your own selfish desires. Those who are born with more abundant gifts than others are obligated to use those gifts for the sake of the world, for all of our fellow brothers and sisters. Those who are born strong have an obligation to assist those who may be less fortunate. You must fulfill this duty with due diligence. Make sure you never forget that. So he was strong from birth? Ojiro scratched the side of his head and asked. Well done for him, Hitoshi complained, averting his gaze from the screen and crossing his arms. Haha Blark. That is a fine lesson to be teaching your child, All Might yelled, briefly changing into his muscular form before throwing up blood. Feeling uneasy, Abara muttered, but it seems like an awful lot to place on a child. Yeah, Denki said with a sigh as he combed through his hair. I mean, at least wait until he's a bit older. Izuku said, I won't, before blinking in shock as his mother held up her hand to embrace him. As she held her son's head tenderly and started to cry, Inko told him, Izuku, I don't have much time left. Having such a strong, gentle child was a true blessing. I believe in you. Deku was unable to speak, so he just basked in his mother's warmth while his own tears welled up in his eyes and the wind chime echoed again. Oh, Shiozaki exclaimed, feeling deeply ashamed upon realizing the circumstance. Uraraka watched the tearful moment with misty eyes and whispered, it was her last wish, with empathy growing in her heart. Shoto scowled at the scene inside, I guess that's why he's so determined to keep fighting. Hua. The Hashira gasped as he regained consciousness. He tightened his hold on his blade and swung it down, his veins exploding. As the weapon slashed into his neck, the demon exclaimed, Gah. As he glared down at the now frightened upper rank, Midoriya growled, it was me who was blessed to have been born to such a woman as you. As the Hashira continued to fight, Juzo gasped in amazement, he's still fighting? Itsuka stared in disbelief, her eyes drying as she exclaimed, that shouldn't be possible, he's been impaled. Kirishima and Tetsu simultaneously exclaimed, that is so manly, and leapt from their seats, grinning at each other. Izuku yelled, aha, as he pushed his blade farther into the tattooed man's neck. Mura, snarled Akaza, who clenched his left hand into a fist and punched the man, trying to remove his head. Awase looked at the screen and cried out uneasily, there's no way he can dodge that, his eyes were shaking. With a silent curse, Jiro bit her lip until it almost began to bleed. Shit, she exclaimed. Is it even possible to survive a direct blow to the head from him? Before the demon's gaze shifted to the horizon, the upper rank thought in shock, he stopped it, what unbelievable strength, and even after I've skewered his body with my arm. Their footsteps blended together as they fought for control. Damn it. The sun will rise soon. I have to kill and make my escape. Mineta screamed, his eyes bulging from his brain, he caught it. Mina excitedly pointed at the screen and exclaimed, and the sun's almost up, he just has to hold out a little longer. When the tattooed man realized his arm was stuck, he yanked it back with all his strength and asked, why can't I pull my arm out? As the two growled and grunted in their struggle, Deku said, I won't let you escape, his eyes hardened. As the crowd stared at him, Nezu muttered, it's just like how he taught Kota to close his wound, he's willing his body to hold onto the demon. Khan's glaze flickered to the man on screen as he asked expectantly, but how long can he keep this up? I don't know, the mammal said, feeling nervous again as it gnawed at the throng. This is my only chance. I have to slice that demon's head off, and fast, Kota gasped as he dashed towards the tree line, grabbing a pitch-black blade as he turned and started running back towards the fighters. I know Mr. Midoriya ordered me to stay back, but I just can't any longer. The sun is rising. I have to get away, Akaza thought frantically, his eyes wide as he searched for a way out, straining to push his arm out as dawn light filled the field. Let go of me, he cried. You shouldn't be trying to fight that monster at all, let alone with that injury, exclaimed Shino, hugging her version of the boy more tightly out of concern for his safety. Shitora sighed and winced as the irate woman glared at him. I hate to say this, but the kid may have a point, that Akaza is clearly starting to panic, now might be the only time he can attack, when the demon is too distracted with trying to get away. Whatever, complained Sosaki, turning away and pouting. Inosuke and Kota had to cover their ears as the upper rank roared, Raha, at the top of his lungs. Trying to push the blade farther, Midoriya yelled, I won't let go, not till I remove your head from your shoulders. Mina exclaimed, holy cow, that was loud, and everyone in the group had to cover their ears. You're telling me, Kyoka snarled, gripping her ears more tightly than the others, and gave the pink-skinned woman a painful look. Sorry, Ashido rubbed the back of her neck and looked sheepish. Together, the two exclaimed, ah, as they pushed themselves even harder. The man with tattoos yelled, let go, while giving him a vicious glare. The flame Hashira yelled, "Ah!" as she pushed the sword deeper into the wound. The two hard quirk users exclaimed, "This is so manly," with tears running down their cheeks. "I can't believe I'm saying this, but..." Kamakiri grinned and sighed. "Yeah, I agree." "Come on, Deku, take that bastard's head off," Bakugo yelled, beaming towards the screen. Inosuke exclaimed, eagerly observing the blade's continued progress. Koda yelled, "Inosuke, move," to get the boy's attention. The boar-headed boy turned to face the voice and grunted, "Huh?" The wounded demon slayer yelled, "If we don't help him now, it'll be too late," and charged forward with all of his strength. The feral boy snarled, "Rah," as he lunged forward to engage in combat. Leaning forward in his chair, Kaibara exclaimed, "This is it, 3 against 1. "Come on, you guys got this," Denki exclaimed, raising his fist. "Show that demon who's boss," shook Hagakure as she yelled. Inosuke jumped into the air, shifted into a crouch, and then thrust his swords forward, saying, "Pierce, beast breathing, Fang 1. With a gentle pat on his chin, Iida noted, "So, he uses beast breathing." Still frowning at the scene, Ochako shrugged and said, "Makes sense, I guess." With a slight tilt of his head, Todoroki muttered, "I would have thought it would be explosion breathing." Katsuki roared, "He is not my counterpart," as he turned to face the boy with the bicolor explosions dancing in his hands. "Ha!" Akaza exclaimed, his arms flesh ripping and tearing as he leapt off the ground, sending a shockwave through the earth. When Midoriya finally started to fall to the ground, Koda winced and said, "Huh?" Inosuke gasped and heaved as the shockwave knocked him back, leaving the demon hanging in midair with its arms missing and the shattered pieces of Izuku's sword embedded in his neck. Sen clicked his tongue and swore, "Damn it, he got free." Reiko watched the scene with wide eyes, whispering in amazement, it was easier to tear his own flesh and break steel than get out of Midoriya's grip. The upper rank thought in a panic, "I've got to find sanctuary from the sunlight," as he quickly regrew his arms and fled into the forest's darkness while observing the increasing light. "Gay!" Koda gasped as he sprinted to the location where the demon had disappeared, yanking his sword back as he hurled it into the shadows. Deep red flames erupted from his mouth. Tetsu glared at the creature and roared with venom, like a coward, running away. Asui prodded her cheek and said, "What's with that reddish fire? Was it flame breathing?" Momo shook her head and said, "I don't think so, it looks too different. Perhaps it's that Hinokami Kagura." "That took too long. I've got to get away from the sun, huh?" Akaza snarled while sprinting through the forest, tearing the blade from his neck before sensing an attack from behind. He turned in time to see Koda's sword pierce his chest, saying, "Gaha." The wounded boy screamed at the escaping monster, "Turn and face me." His voice reverberated throughout the forest, "Don't run away. I'm not done with you, coward." Tagaru laughed bitterly, "Ha, nice throw." Tetsu pointed to the screen and yelled, "See, a coward. Definitely not manly." Eijiro folded his arms across his chest and scoffed. "I don't know if he should be taunting that thing," Abara sighed, her eyes glaring at the demon. Tokage waved the devout girl away, saying, "He's too busy running away with his tail between his legs. Nah, it'll be fine." "Huh? What the hell are you babbling about, kid? Don't you have a brain inside that head of yours?" The man with the tattoos growled as the veins in his face became visible. He continued to run into the darkness with an expression of pure rage. "I'm not running away from you. I'm running from the sun. And besides, this battle's already decided. With a wound like that, he'll die before long," he said. The child Koda squeaked, "Eep," upon seeing the demon's expression. "Filthy creature," Shiozaki spat, her red eyes growing more intense. "We don't regenerate as fast, and when we lose a limb, it's gone for good. Don't run away, you bastard," Koda yelled with righteous rage, his voice cracking and breaking as he glared into the darkness. "Don't forget that the Demon Slayer Corps is always fighting you demons in the dead of night, where you have the advantage. We're not like you at all." Toru asked again, sounding perplexed. "Demon Slayer Corps?" Reiko muttered, lost in thought, "So, they do belong to a demon-slaying organization." Izuku watched in stunned silence as the boy hunched over the severed limb in his abdomen, blood dripping from his mouth. "You didn't win against him. He kept everyone safe. He fought to the very end so no one would die. You're the one who lost. Midoriya is the true victor." The boy continued. "You're a coward, a coward. Mr. Midoriya is stronger than you'll ever hope to be." much stronger. You tell him, kid, Mina exclaimed, applauding the boy's remarks. Yeah, show that bully who's boss, Setsuna said, grinning mistily at the screen. When Kota finally ran out of steam, he gasped, gay, and his panting soon turned to wailing as he sobbed, ahaha. Kota, Mandalay sighed, her eyes heavy with tears as she watched the boy sob. Damn. Sen cursed, a sense of powerlessness rising. Kendo struggled to contain her tears as she whispered, it's really over. Tetsu looked at his lap in exasperation and muttered, this is, before slamming his fist painfully into his own thigh, saying, damn it. Izuku's gentle voice called out, drawing the attention of the sobbing boys, don't work yourself up like that. You would reopen your wound, and that would be very bad. You dying, my young Izumi, would truly spell my defeat. With tears still streaming down his face, Kota looked at the man in disbelief and whispered, Mr. Midoriya. With tears streaming down her own cheeks, Ochako muttered, Deku. A hole in his stomach and he's more concerned about someone else, Jiro sighed bitterly, observing her lap as she painfully clenched her fist. That seems like the Green we know. Tenya mumbled, always putting others first, as he slowly opened and closed the wounds from his fight with Stain. With a gentle smile on his face and blood still streaming down it, Deku said, come here, lad. Let's talk one last time. The young demon slayer was unable to speak, so he just bit back a sob and got up to approach the Hashira. Midoriya gasped as the arm that was still in his stomach turned to ash in the morning sun, allowing his blood to flow down his abdomen and pool beneath him. When I was dreaming of the past, there was something I remembered. My old residence, you should go pay it a visit. There are notes left by the previous flame Hashira there. I recall my father used to read them often, but I'm afraid I don't know their contents myself. The words. Within those notes, you may find the dance you mentioned, the Hinokami Kagura. Bakugo growled angrily, what the hell does that have to do with anything? Shiozaki bit her lip to contain her tears as she sighed, as much as I hate to say this, but I agree. There are more pressing matters. With tears in his eyes, Kota watched the man and pleaded, please. Mr. Midoriya, enough of that. Just think about yourself now. Can you heal up with a breathing technique? Kota asked. That's right, Kosei said, sounding almost thrilled at the thought. In an attempt to lift everyone's spirits, Awase forced a smile and said, if he can hold on to that demon, maybe he can stop the bleeding, at least until he can get to a doctor or something. Nezu closed his eyes and corrected gravely, that won't work. The flame Hashira smiled kindly and said, no, very soon, I'll be dead. Subaraba muttered, oh, and sank back into his chair. Yosetsu shrank into himself as well, muttering, never mind. The man said gravely, his smile never leaving his face, before that happens, I need you to hear me out. I have a younger brother named Senjiro. Please tell him to follow his heart and walk down the path he feels is right. And tell my father, that I want him to look after himself. After giving it some thought, Ochako said, you know, I don't think Deku has ever mentioned his dad. Iida muttered, trying to remember what the green-haired boy might have said, now that I think about it, I don't think he has either. Unable to remember what his friend had said, Shoto asked the explosive boy, Bakugo, do you know anything about his father? Katsuki glared at the three of them, growling, I know enough that you should drop it. Deku went on, and finally, about your sister. Kota exclaimed, his eyes wide. Know that I believe in her. I accept her as part of our ranks. Izuku clarified, beaming at the weeping boy. Your sister, despite being infected with the demonic curse, shed blood to protect the people inside that train from demons. And anyone who does that, regardless of what is said to the contrary, is a rightful member of the Demon Slayer Corps. With a slightly surprised expression, Shiratoko clarified, so, she is his sister. Disappointed by the young man's passing but enthralled with the idea of Nezuko, remarkable. Nezu whispered softly, a demon fighting for demon slayers. In an attempt to uplift the boy, the Hashira went on, so, hold your head high. If you are feeling disheartened, that you are somehow not enough. A fine motto to have, Yagi exclaimed, grinning pitifully at his protege's rendition. The principal looked at the boy with pride and said, it truly is. Reminds me of our own, plus ultra. As the boy started to sob again, Midoriya said, it won't patiently stand by as you grieve. Dry your eyes and look ahead. You may feel like digging your heels in, but the flow of time waits for no one. Kota sobbed as he muttered, Midoriya, and related the word to the death of his own parents. Shino rubbed the child's back once more and whispered, Kota, Know that I'll always be here for you. Yawara grunted, giving the child a little smile. We all will. Yeah, Ryuko exclaimed, holding back her tears to make the child smile. You're one of us. As the boys' cries grew louder and even Inosuke started to cry silently, Deku reassured them, don't feel bad that I'm going to die. As a Hashira, it's natural I'd protect you all. The young buds must be allowed to bloom. Any other Hashira would have done the same as I. As her words echoed over the room's quiet sobs, Toru muttered, but there had to be another way, with tears streaming down her cheeks. The teachers just looked at the students, understanding and sharing the sentiment, without saying anything. With the screen displaying each of the boys as he said their names and Zenitsu assisting Nezuko into a big box, Izuku firmly said, Young Izumi, young boar, boy of yellow, you must continue to grow. And eventually you will lend your aid by becoming the next Hashira. I believe in each and every one of you. Nobody spoke, allowing the words to fully register. Even though it seemed nonsensical, they all thought the words were directed at them and encouraged them to improve. Their doubts, self-loathing, and hesitation were washed away by the words that hung in the air like an open embrace. As Kota started crying again, the flame Hashira gave him a gentle smile before focusing on a glowing figure over the boy's shoulder. Huh. Pony muttered, bewildered by the hazy vision, what the? Yayorozu gasped and looked at the screen, tears welling up in her eyes. Is that? She asked. Mother, Midoriya asked himself as he looked at the radiant woman. Did I do well? The responsibility I took upon myself to fulfill, was I successful? Inko grinned broadly at her son and exclaimed, I'm so proud of you, my son. Ha! Izuku paused, then gasped joyfully, and Izuku Midoriya, the flame Hashira, died smiling as the screen gradually turned to static after gradually fading into blinding white. As the room erupted around her, Yui fought back the tears in her eyes and whispered, wow. Yanagi whispered, not daring to raise her voice for fear of it breaking, is that it? Snipe sighed and put his hat back on his chest, saying, Kid really knows how to give a speech that pulls at the heartstrings. Nomori wiped away her tears and said, you can say that again. Tetsu muttered, I guess I get what you were talking about, and then jumped out of his chair, shouting, because that was manly as hell. Kirishima yelled, you can say that again, and leapt to join the boy, both of their cheeks streaming with tears. Abara started, are they? Before her voice broke and she asked, are they all like that? Pretty much, Momo said in a sorrowful whisper as she made a handkerchief to dab at her tears and gave Kyoka another piece of cloth so she could do the same. For a while, nobody spoke, sobbing in silence as they lamented the last battle of the flame Hashira. Izuku Midoriya, a real hero.
So this was it for this series. I hope you enjoyed it. To watch more series like this, subscribe to my channel. Till then, bye bye.